Good morning to everyone. Welcome back to the board meeting, a third day. I hope that you had a good rest after the two intensive days we had over the last 2 days, on Monday and Tuesday. Today, as you know, the meeting will finish a little bit earlier than on the other days because we have something to do together in the afternoon. So we will profit from this a little bit shorter day to get focused during the morning on what we need to do, we need to focus on. So today, or this morning until lunchtime, what we will have on our agenda is the adoption and implementation updates and some information about the development and of the IMAC. Then we will have the PI rollout, and we will have IESB representatives speaking to this board, updating us on the IESB work on PI. And we will have an update on technology from the working group, the technology working group, about what is on their minds and in their agenda these days. So this is the agenda for today. First topic, adoption and implementation, something that has been keeping us very busy. I will not repeat what we already discussed on Monday, but this is clearly and was identified and agreed by the board that it is going to be one of the key topics, strategic topics for this board over the next time. So I'm happy that we have the working group strongly supporting us in this direction. This is going to be, it is already something for the whole board and the whole staff. It's not only for the working group, but the working group has been very, very helpful and supporting us in setting a structured, targeted, rational strategy in terms of adoption and implementation. We also agree that this group will go a little bit broader than just sustainability. So we will need to discuss very soon what exactly is going to be on their agenda. But for the time being, what we will have is an update from the adoption and implementation working group. And for that purpose, Amajit, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you more exactly. Thank you very much for the work that you have been doing in chairing this group. And thank you very much for joining us at those unsocial hours in your place. So we welcome you to this morning again, and please, the floor is yours to present the update on the adoption and implementation working group, please.
Thank you, Gabriela, and good morning, everyone there. So, Gabriela, as you mentioned, that over the last couple of days, I've heard this word adoption and implementation many times. All of us have heard that. We've discussed the adjustment to the overall IESBA strategy, the strategic direction, and I think what stands out very clearly as a part of this discussion that we've had over the last 2 days is the proposal to step up our activities, our efforts in the A&I space. So what we'll do in this session, we have a presentation. We will provide an update on the activities of the working group since last board meeting. It's been a very busy period, and I'm kind of pleased with what we've achieved since the last board meetings. We've had some good progress on several fronts, some good outcomes, and also some very promising developments in some jurisdictions, and we'll talk about those developments as we go along. Let me just pick 3 items quickly before I hand over to John for details. One is that we have completed the task of identifying jurisdictions which shall be prioritized for A&I activities. It is focused, as you rightly said, presently we are focused on sustainability side. And this is a first cut, and this is a moving target, and it will evolve as the list will keep changing as we go along, depending upon the developments. But still, we have a concrete, tangible list, and I'll talk about that later. Second is we've stepped up our stakeholder engagement during this period, and that engagement includes, stakeholders like IFAC, ISSB, and of course, IAF also, and IAASB. We will give some details around that. Another very notable development has been the substantial progress that we made on the setting up of IIMAG, which Luigi has kindly agreed to chair. So let me pause with that and I'll come back, but over to John for further details.
Thank you very much, Amarjeet, and good morning, everyone. So yeah, I'm just going to go through a bit of an update on the activities over the quarter. So the agenda item 4A provides an overview of those activities, including updates to planned activities, but also new activities. So I'll just highlight a couple of the new activities that we've been working on. So in relation to, so Sylvia and Elaine actually have been developing guidance material that provides a comparison or a mapping of Part 4A to the IESA, so as to highlight any sort of key differences between the parts, including any incremental aspects that relate to the IESA. Rui and their comms team, together with technical staff, facilitated the production of 3 separate short whiteboard videos. So they're less than 2 minutes each. There's 3 of those. So the first one provides an overview of IESBA sustainability and expert standards and the key role that they play in the sustainability reporting ecosystem. The second one is a brief case study applying the ethics provisions on dealing with pressure in the context of sustainability reporting. And then the third one is a brief case study which applies the non-assurance services provisions in the IESA. So we're in the sort of final stages of the development of those videos. As we heard on Monday, yeah, the IESBA staff Q&As on the IESA and also the joint IESBA IAASB FAQs on the IESA and the ISA 5000. They've all been obviously circulated to the board, and as mentioned earlier this week, they're due to be published this week. Today, in fact. So yeah, Sylvia's just informed me today. Elaine and myself, we've been working on developing adapting the summary of prohibitions in Part 4 of the code, which apply to the public interest entities, but adapting that for the provisions in the IESA. This is subject to the normal review process, and we hope to share that with the board members in the coming weeks. The action plan also includes a number of other planned materials which will progressively produce and publish throughout 2025, including staff question and answers on sustainability reporting and experts and various other materials. So just moving on to some of the stakeholder engagement that Amarjeet mentioned that was been undertaken in Q2. Obviously, we're aware there's the IFAC and the IESBA, along with the IAASB, held a multi-stakeholder summit on April 14th, and that was in Paris. This focused on the practical implementation of the IESA and strengthening current and future engagement with the IESBA and the IAASB. I just did want to point out a couple of key points from that press release, which are relevant to the A&I work. So first of all, the summit reaffirmed the important role that global assurance and ethics standards need to play in building trust in reported sustainability information, and hence the importance of ensuring successful global adoption and implementation. And then one of the 2 priority areas that were highlighted also in that press release, so one of those key priorities was the clear value of enhanced coordination among the IESBA, the IAASB and IFAC leadership, working together to maximise the use of limited resources so as to progress the adoption of the IESBA and the IAASB's international standards globally and to support their consistent implementation. So obviously a key aspect relevant to our work in the A&I space. At a staff level, we've continued to meet and collaborate with IFAC staff on a regular basis. So we've continued with our IFAC, IESBA, A&I meetings, and they cover a number of different matters, including outreach and awareness raising, the project updates, adoption tracking, and the PAO engagement by the IFAC regional managers. And also around the development of implementation and support and resources and what's being undertaken in that regard. We also meet separately with IFAC staff to discuss adoption tracking process, and receive updates on adoption status in the various jurisdictions. So the meetings with the IFAC staff have been really extremely helpful to progress our work. And I just did want to point that out and just thank the IFAC staff for their openness and willingness to collaborate with us at the staff level. It's been really helpful.
John, if I can, John, sorry to in there. So I think this is an important point which John just now made. And I would just like to emphasize that so far, as John rightly mentioned, the coordination has been at the staff level, but I guess we need more engagement at the leadership level for promoting adoption and implementation. So there is a lot of value in doing that. Obviously, all the agencies have limited resources, so we can leverage each other's resources. That is a no-brainer. A little challenge or little issue to my mind is that when we work together, we need to be on the same page. We need to have common understanding of what do we exactly mean by if we say that a jurisdiction has adopted the standard, so what is the definition of adoption? Or if we say partially adopted, then what do we mean by that? So in terms of a common understanding of the terminology or the taxonomy around adoption and implementation, I think that we need to arrive at very quickly. Otherwise, these terms can mean different things to different people. So what I'm trying to say is that the extent of depth and rigor that we want while we undertake these activities. So there should be a common understanding of what is that rigor and depth we want to get to. Back to you, John. Thanks.
Thank you, Amarjeet. Just moving on to the next point there. So the comms and technical staff, we partnered with the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants to develop an article by Gabriella on trust in sustainability reporting, and that was in the ACCA's Accounting and Business magazine, which obviously has a very large and wide readership. The article highlights increases, in the sustainability reporting, the risks of greenwashing and other ethical considerations, how the IESBA standards framework, how that addresses these risks, and also the support that the IESBA is making available in respect of ANI. We've had 2 IESBA, ISSB, IAASB meetings during the quarter, so as to share updates on ANI activities, matters of coordination relating to the adoption of the respective board's sustainability standards and around the benefits of the global sustainability reporting assurance and ethics ecosystem. So these meetings will continue as an ongoing process, and obviously we believe these are critical to the success of the ANI activities. And Amarjeet will cover that a little bit more later on in the presentation as well. We also had productive awareness raising opportunities in the UAE and Qatar. I presented at the UNCTAD ISA Second Regional Partnership meeting on enhancing sustainability in the Gulf and neighbouring countries. That was in Abu Dhabi, and provided a really good opportunity to engage with key stakeholders from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and also the UAE. And Amarjeet met with members of Qatar's working group on for the national framework on the external assurance for sustainability reporting. And also that discussed sustainability developments in Qatar, obviously around the IESBA sustainability standards, but also around the ANI roadmap that we're developing and the support that we're wanting to provide to jurisdictions. IESBA staff, we continued our engagement with the IAF on its mapping of its current ethics requirements that relate to sustainability assurance engagements. So mapping that to the IESA, which we provided an update at the March board meeting in relation to that. The IAF is currently considering its way forward with respect to this mapping and their framework development. Predominantly, this is due to changes in the external environment, including the impact of the EU omnibus and the reduction of entities that are required to report and those sort of things. So they're considering that way forward. We'll continue to liaise with the IAF regarding their consideration and further developments on the way forward. The next couple of slides covers matters that we did discuss on Monday, but I just wanted to highlight a few points that are relevant to ANI. So the SAC meeting on May 6th, that included a session on deregulation and the potential impacts for the sustainability and also other international standards. Obviously, there was discussion around deregulation trends, and obviously that does vary by region, and it is, as pointed out, it is a cyclical thing. Obviously, this does, though, create challenges from an ANI perspective in some of the jurisdictions, which goes back to Amarjeet's point around like the prioritisation of jurisdictions, and that is, I guess, a moving target, and we need to monitor developments. In relation to strategic guidance for the boards, there was mention of, making sure principles-based, scalable, flexible, especially for SMEs and SMPs. And this clearly connects back to the discussion on Monday about simplification as it relates to the IESBA standard setting activities and making the code more accessible. Again, there was mention around ensuring there's collaboration with IFAC, PAOs and the global institutions. And again, we think this is obviously critical to the IESBA's ANI activities. And then in relation to the JSS, so the May 7 included a session on the ANI of the sustainability and expert standards. And then at the joint JSS session on May 8, there was a session on deregulation and the impacts of that on adoption. So some of the matters that were raised, there was some concerns around non-PAs performing sustainability assurance engagements around quality, systems, consistency, and oversight issues that were raised. That again, obviously, that raises the importance of ensuring there's support for the non-PAs. There was some concerns around implementation challenges, again, around the value chain, long association, non-assurance services. But obviously that highlights the importance of the IIMAG, which Sylvia will talk to later in the presentation. And then in terms of ANI suggestions, there was suggestions to boost engagement with early adopters and provide targeted support. So again, this is really key to our ANI activities and also the prioritisation work that we're looking at that Amarjeet will talk to shortly. There was comments around developing user-friendly modular digital access to the code. And again, this links back to the discussions on Monday around simplification and making the code more accessible and user-friendly. Another comment talked about clarifying the overlaps or differences between Part 4A and the IESA. And as I mentioned just before, Sylvia and Elaine are actually working on a specific guidance material to address that particular concern. So I'll now pass it over to back to Amarjeet to go through the jurisdictional prioritisation work that the working group has been looking at.
Thanks, John. So we have talked about this in the past also in terms of the criteria for jurisdictional prioritization. So I would just like to focus on the right-hand side of the slide first. So there we've listed economic size and the status of adoption of sustainability reporting standards, either the ISSB standards or any other local framework which a jurisdiction may have, and also the indication to adopt the sustainability assurance standards of IEESB. So we've been primarily guided by these three factors. Plus, after some deliberation, the working group decided to add some more factors for developing our priority list. And those factors are two factors, actually. One is if we have an IESBA board member present in a jurisdiction where there is some activity on the adoption of sustainability disclosure or assurance standards, that could merit inclusion in the priority list. Similarly, if there is a potential demand for adoption of the standards, there could be an expression of interest or some indication that they are ready to adopt the ethical standards, ISA standards. Maybe they are not, they don't meet the criteria of economic size, and I would maybe just cite Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and UAE that is guided by this factor. So if you see the left-hand side, there are 17 jurisdictions which have been listed there. But as I said earlier, this would be a kind of a moving target because things are changing very fast. And in some sense, the list will continue to be indicative. But having said that, I think we are seeing some traction in some parts of the world. So we are seeing traction in Australia, Brazil, even India, and I'll talk about that. We're also seeing traction in South Africa and UK, of course. So maybe, I would just request our respective board members from these jurisdictions just to, give us a little flavor of what is happening in their jurisdictions. Maybe we could begin with China, Australia. Chana, could you give us some sense of what is happening?
Yeah, thanks, Amajit. So at the March board meeting, at that stage, Australia had issued 5,000 IESA 5,000 assurance standard at the end of January, 28th of January to be exact. And they had referred to part 5 of the code because for sustainability assurance for the relevant ethical requirements. And also they backdated the standard to 1st of January 2025, which was the date of the start of the climate legislation in Australia. So that caused some friction and pushback, the backdating part, as well as the reference to part 5 of the IESBA code. And then on the May 14th, the IESBA, the Auditing Standards Board, had another board meeting, and they decided for the moment to remove the reference to part 5 of the IESBA code. However, in the meantime, APSB, that is the board I work for, had already issued the exposure drafts on ISR as well as the experts. So it was already out in the market. So the plan is that once our board issues the standard, which is scheduled for next week, so 17th of June, there's a board meeting set up, and we are taking both the AESA, the Australian version, as well as the expert standard for approval. We have got some comments from the respondents, and the board will have to work through those comments. The biggest pushback we got was on the start date for the value chain, because we put 1st January 2026 as the start date for the AESA, and then put the value chain 18 months from that date. But the feedback we got from the respondents was that, look, even if Australia has to follow it, some of these are global supply chains, and to get the information, can we align with the IESBA start date? So at the moment, the board papers that have gone out, technical staff have recommended, okay, let's align with the IESBA date of 1st July 2028 for the start of the value chain, but with early adoption permitted. Why we initially recommended 1st July 2027 was that was aligning with the legislation, because the legislation says scope 3 assurance has to start on 1st July 2027. So that was the reason why we were aligning with that date to accommodate that. But as we are allowing early adoption, it doesn't really matter. People can take it and align with the 1st July 2028 date. And if they need to do it sooner, then they can early adopt. So that was sort of the major comment. But other than that, we are not got significant comments that we cannot deal with. So hopefully it will get approved next week. And the start date for the IESA is 1st July 2026, which has sort of got generally majority support from the respondents. Thanks, Amajit.
Uh, Thanks, Chana. That looks like a lot of progress to me, despite the challenges that you mentioned. Apparently, Australia is the leader, in terms of adoption of ISR. So let me move on to Brazil. Vanya, who's also a working group member. Over to you, Vanya, please.
Thank you, Majid. I think in Brazil, we are doing very good in this sense as well. By regulation, listed companies and financial institutions are required to apply IFRS S1 and S2 beginning 2026 in a mandatory way. Smaller banks beginning 2028. But also what happened is that they were allowed to apply in a voluntary basis for 2024 and 5. For 2024, 2 companies in Brazil subscribed to the early adoption. Vale, the mining company, one of the largest in the world, and a big retail company in Brazil as well. Vale has just released their first report on June the 2nd, very well received both in Brazil and internationally, with limited assurance provided by ISA 3000, not yet 5000, but if you consider that ISA 5000 was approved last September, we do not yet have a Portuguese version of the standard in Brazil. But the good news is that they are under translation. Not only the assurance standard is at 5,000, but also the IESBA. And the plan is to adopt them together beginning 2026. And last week we had a very huge conference in Brazil. And the objective for us was exactly to pass the message that if we want transparency and sustainability, we need to have all the pieces in place, not only the reporting one. So we received the standard setters both for the private sector and the public one, IESBA and IESBA, but also IESBA and IESBA can bring us with his presence, a brilliant presence. In the first day, we had exactly these standard setters presenting themselves and the standards. And in a panel that I was honored to moderate, we showed how they work together, how the standard setters dialogue in order to provide the interoperability and connectivity that is so important for us. And to close this day, we had the case study of the report of Vale and from the Ministry of Management and Innovation in Brazil as a case for the public sector. And on the second day, we have workshops. We have first a big meeting between regulators and standard setters, so we can build a bridge on these 2 portions. And after that, we had workshops where IESBA provided training on applying IFRS S1 and S2, and Ken and Willie provide a training on applying ISA 5000 and IESA for the Brazilian market. And we are very grateful for your participation, and we are very happy with the progress that we've been having in Brazil. For 2025, we expect more than 50 companies already applying IFRS S1 and S2. And beginning 2026, they will also be using IESA and ISA 5000. Thank you, Amajid.
Thank you, Vanya. Sounds good. Looks like a good direction of travel. Can I move
Sorry,
to
Amajid. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Amajid. I think that Ken wanted to add
Oh, yes,
something.
please. Sorry, I can't see it, so please just feel free to.
No,
Yeah.
No worries about it. Thank you very much, Vanya, for this excellent report back on the conference last week. It was like you said, it was a huge conference, over 700 participants in person and virtually in Brazil. And then was also broadcast live across Latin America. So I was really honored to have had the opportunity to be there together with my counterpart, Philip Botha, on IESBA. And as indicated, it was a very lively event with many panel sessions. I participated in two of those. But really, my key takeaways from all of this is that there's clearly a huge mobilization of all the key stakeholders in the ecosystem, in the reporting ecosystem, because 2026 is literally just around the corner. And what I learned, really, we had this very large meeting, as indicated, with the key stakeholders, the securities regulator, CVM, the central bank. We had representatives from Brazilian ministries, the profession itself, the firms, the PAOs, the Bracon and CFC preparers, and some investors as well. So a lot of people who are all coming together. And I think, to use your words, which I kind of noted, the meeting was really an opportunity to build bridges and to make those connections and build those relationships, because the first wave of mandatory reporting is coming on. And there's going to be need for all the stakeholders to work together. And really what I took away was really this motivation and this willingness to collaborate, to build capacity in the market. And really the need for capacity building really was very clear. We heard it from the different stakeholders and the profession, the professional accounting bodies in particular. They're working very, very deliberately, very systematically to prepare the market. And the market, in fact, is, we heard really in terms of the challenges and the concerns, that the market isn't quite prepared yet for the first wave of mandatory reporting. The preparers themselves are, there's a very significant lack of capacity, knowledge, skills in terms of the reporting capabilities and so forth. And even anecdotally, what we heard is, as Vanya indicated, the banks have been a bit of the early adopters, and they are perhaps the ones that are more prepared for the first kind of mandatory engagements and the reporting and so forth. But even they themselves are losing their people, because the ones who have built experience in doing sustainable reporting, well, guess what? They are being poached by other companies in Brazil, and therefore that's an issue of talent and having the capacity is very acute in Brazil. What I also took is some questions, I suppose, in terms of how, insofar as our standards are concerned, and in particular the IESA, how non-PAs are going to be using the standards, because Brazil, in fact, is one market that has very intently and very deliberately limited the ability for practitioners to perform sustainable assurance engagements to audit firms, right? So it's a market that's limited to audit firms. But there is a recognition that Brazil is not an island. Well, it is literally not an island, but it is also metaphorically not an island when it comes to sustainable assurance, because Brazil has very big companies. I mean, Vale is a case in point. It is a very global company, and it has components in different jurisdictions. And people were scratching their heads and wondering, well, what are we going to do with, if in other jurisdictions there are components of those global companies, Brazilian global companies, and those components are using non-PAs to perform, the assurance engagements. And are we going to be able to trust them? And what is the oversight system? What is the regulatory infrastructure around the non-PAs in those other jurisdictions? So these are open questions, I suppose, and we didn't really have kind of answers to those questions, because at the end of the day, it will be up to the individual jurisdictions to decide how they're going to oversee and how they're going to monitor the non-PAs. But a very clear question there, very a degree of concern. And then, just going through my notes here, just to see if there might be one or two other questions that There were questions around greenwashing. I mean, really, people were wondering how to define greenwashing, whether the code actually defined it, and how PAs on the reporting as well on the assurance side would address issues of greenwashing, how they would identify greenwashing, and also how to deal with reporting of sustainability information when potentially there could be information that's not fairly presented. So not necessarily greenwashing, but how to make that judgment when information might not be fairly presented. So already we can see that practitioners and the POs are already intently thinking about how they're going to be applying the ESA and as well as our standards on reporting, and kind of figuring out how they're going to deal with those issues of potentially misleading information, and how the code would be guiding them in that regard. But otherwise, I thought it was a fantastic event. This was the second conference in the. I suppose it's going to be a continuation in coming years as well. But it was very well organized. It was very clear that all stakeholders were coming together and being very willing and putting the effort to collaborate and kind of building the capacity locally.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks.
Amajit, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken. So let's now hear some good news from South Africa. Over to Sadia, please.
Thank you, Amajit. So I think maybe before I begin with the good news, I should tell you a little bit about South Africa. So the first thing is that there is no reporting requirement for sustainability reporting in South Africa. However, sustainability reporting and sustainability assurance is not new for South Africa. It has been done from time to time. It's interesting to note that Ken, you shared that Brazil had there's some traction in the banks, and that's the regulator we see actually issuing guidance on what would sustainability reporting look like. However, our stance has been that we will adopt the standards and allow ourselves time to, when the reporting requirement comes out, we will be ready. And if it's voluntary reporting and falls within the IESBA, it would be required. And this is with the our process is with conversations with registered auditors, and this is what they would want as well to adopt the standards. I say standards because that is the process that we are using. We are adopting both the IASB standards and IESBA standards in a coordinated way. We see various interlinks between the two, and we think the conversation should happen at the same time. As a regulator in South Africa, we do not have mandate to issue professional agnostic standards. However, this hasn't hindered our process on adoption. It was easy to amend the definition in the code and then to clarify that this is for registered auditors in South Africa, not for all sustainability assurance providers. When we considered adoption, there was conversation about issues that are new to the code, such as value chain entities and group entities. However, the committee found great value in the basis for conclusion and in the frequently asked questions that will come through, and from staff who provided some guidance when we needed to test some issues. So what we have done is we've taken that diagram from the basis for conclusion and added it to our code, because I think that would facilitate adoption, understanding of the code. So the good news is on Friday last week, we issued our exposure draft, including South African amendments and the experts standard as well for exposure. So this is part of our due process. Because we have South African amendments from the international standard, we have to put out on exposure. And we envision that after we receive comments, we should be looking at finalization, if all goes according to plan, by the end of this year, and adoption early next year after our board process. The last thing to say is that with this year comes opportunity and time for conversations. So if someone wasn't following the standard, this is when the conversation will happen, and this is when education will happen before the effective date. And we think that the IESBA's processes on adoption implementation would really help us learn from other jurisdictions, as well as for us to share our learnings as well.
Thanks. Thanks, Sadia. May I now turn to Mark for good news from UK, please?
Thank you, Amarjeet. So just by way of a bit of background, sustainability reporting, the UK has had TCFD reporting now for a number of years. The government has announced its intention to consult on the adoption of IESBA standards. We are waiting for that consultation to be issued, hopefully shortly. Our Financial Conduct Authority, the securities regulator, has said that when the government issues the standards for consultation, they will consult on changes to the listing rules, which would replace TCFD reporting with IESBA reporting. At the last meeting of the FRC board, the board approved the issue of a consultation for the adoption of ISSA 5000 in the UK. That consultation runs through to the end of July. We have a slightly unusual situation in the UK. The FRC sets the ethical standard for auditors, and the professional accountancy bodies set the code of ethics for professional accountants. So the way in which we have addressed the ethical requirements in our consultation on 5000 is the relevant ethical requirements refer directly to the IESBA code. So our requirements in the code are referenced through ISSA 5000. We have kept pretty much to the international version of 5000. The only change we have is a long-standing prohibition in the UK on the use of internal auditors to support an audit engagement, which we've made parallel for sustainability engagements. So at this stage, there is no mandatory assurance regime in the UK, but we took the decision to make the standard available because there is significant demand in the market, not least because there are a significant number of dual listed companies, and with jurisdictions like Australia already moving ahead quickly, it's important that we've got the standards available so companies can meet reporting needs and assurance needs in multiple jurisdictions. So end of July for the closure of the consultation, and then we'll go back to the board for final approval in the autumn.
Thanks. Thanks, Mark. So very quickly, I'll just give a little update on what's happening here in India. So just to set the context first, in India, we have a mandatory sustainability reporting requirement, which is given by SEBI for the top 1,000 listed companies by market cap. And this mandatory reporting requirement has been there now for the past 2-3 years. We have not adopted IESBA. We have our own nationally developed, locally developed framework. It is called BRSR framework, Business Responsibility and Sustainability Report. We also have introduced mandatory assurance requirement for BRSR core, and core is a subset of some 40 odd indicators, not for the entire report, but for some critical parameters, we mandated the assurance with a glide path to the market. So the good news is some nudges and pushes. The Institute of Chartered Accountants of India has constituted a group. This was as recent as about 3 weeks back. And this group has been constituted to consider ISA 5000 and IESBA sustainability standards. And they are going to recommend how these frameworks can be best adopted in the Indian context, and they will come out with the exposure draft sometime soon, hopefully. And Deepa, who's a TA with me, she's also a part of this group. So that's where we are in terms of developments in India. Very quickly, I'll just talk a little bit about my meeting in Qatar. I happened to be there for IESBA annual conference. That was last month. And I visited Qatar Financial Center Regulatory Authority, QFCRA, and I had a meeting with a working group, as John mentioned, which comprised representatives from Qatar Central Bank, Qatar Financial Market Authority, and QFCRA. I met them for about an hour and made a presentation on our framework. So my sense was that their familiarity with IESA and also its value proposition was relatively lower, if I can say, compared to their awareness about ISSB standards and ISSA 5000. And no surprises there. Even in India, I find the awareness about IESA is relatively lower compared to ISSB and IAASB standards, but things are improving. So I'm kind of optimistic. So in terms of my takeaway from the session, I thought it helped in raising awareness about IESA and its significance, and also in terms of creating some motivations to look for its adoption in Qatar. So on behalf of IESBA, I offered support for a follow-up deep dive session. And I suggested that we could do a webinar or for Qatar, or maybe a regional webinar where we could have like-minded jurisdictions from that region, so that it optimizes our resources and reach. So that's in terms of where we are. But may I now request for a very brief, quick kind of any other jurisdiction, any other board member who's listed in this list on the screen. If I missed out anyone, if I'm not aware about the developments in any of these jurisdictions, just feel free to step in now and maybe a brief sort of intervention if you want to make. Otherwise, we'll move on.
Yes. Okay, Amarjit, I'll have a few additional things, but I see that Ken also wants to speak, so I don't see anyone. Christelle, please.
Just a brief word on France. The CSRD, ESRD was implemented in France and applicable for the 24 reporting period. So the first assurance, limited assurance were performed, and to our knowledge, with Bruno, only by audit companies, even if other professionals were authorized to operate. And we started the study we wanted to perform in France on the potential issues identified on the assurance work for 24, if they were to apply ISA 5000 or IESA. So we have started that. We will share with Ken a preliminary document, which is only on one firm. So, and we expect that it will continue on a few other firms, and it's encouraging. Yes, I think it's encouraging. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Christelle. Ken, please. Sorry, David Clark, sorry.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Amarjit. This sort of extends a little bit from the conversation we've had already. There have been some developments in Saudi Arabia in the last month or so, and they're developing a sort of unified national guideline, if you like, to sort of optimize the use of ISSB and also GRI. I think there's a confusion in the marketplace about what they're supposed to report under, so they're trying to bring it all together in a sort of national guideline as they go forward. So it's probably useful as an update.
Thank you very much, David. Ken, please.
Yeah, just maybe just a question more than anything in relation to the jurisdictional prioritization, because when I was in Brazil, what I learned from Elizabeth Seeger, who was the ISSB board member who attended the conference, was that whilst Brazil is one of the first jurisdictions, amongst one of the first jurisdictions to have adopted the ISSB standards, in fact, Turkey was the first one, a first jurisdiction to have been off the block insofar as adoption of S1 and S2 is concerned. So maybe what I would ask the working group is to consider adding Turkey to this list, because Turkey is one of G20s, as many of us know. It is already an adopter of S1 and S2, and we just need to kind of understand the strategy with regard to sustainability assurance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Amajit, do you give me, can I have 2 minutes?
Yes, please, of course.
So a few additional information and some comments. First, sorry, Nancy, I hadn't seen you. Nancy, please.
I'll make this very brief. In the US, I co-chair the ethics task force that will be responsible for adopting sustainability. We have just started that work, and there's some hurdles in the US. The Auditing Standards Board has also started work on the ISA 5000 adoption, and those two groups are coordinating very, very closely. I think the timing of this is probably not optimal. I doubt we get an exposure draft out before early 2026 at the earliest. And there are some hurdles. We have a board meeting in August where I think our charge will be established, and I'll have more details then. But I just wanted to share that.
Thank you very much, Nancy. And that's very encouraging, because at least we know that there is an intention to consider the possible adoption or whatever you want to do with these standards. So Amajit and some additional information. First, on Brazil, yes, I don't want to say much more because already Ken said a lot, but just letting you know that this has been really by the working group and everyone identified as a priority, because they can be the next ones after Australia. So there is a lot of focus. Ken was there. I'm going to speak to the IBRACOM conference next week, and then we'll go back there for the pre-COP conference in October. So there is a lot of focus on Brazil. We need to make this happen. Still, the rest of Latin America is not there. I know they are not the largest 20 individual GDP, blah, blah, blah. But having been there recently for the Forum of Firms in Peru with Hector, and if you have something to add, please add. And having had many conversations and with at CRECER as well, it is clear that Latin America is moving as well. So just as examples, Hector, correct me if I'm wrong, Colombia, and they invited us to go there to speak in a conference in August, because they really want to adopt standards. Peru is already working on the translation of the standards. This is not going to be mandatory. There is nothing mandatory there, and even when they say that it's mandatory, there is no enforcement. So it is what it is, but still it's what they do with all the other standards. So they are working on the translation and hoping to add the sustainability standards to the code, to their code very soon, to their standards. Argentina, big surprise, jurisdiction which has always been identified in my maps, IFAC maps, as a jurisdiction which do not adopt our standards. Surprisingly, they do. There is only one exception, which I think is, help me, Hector, NOCLA or something like that. There is an exception. So they make an exception in a part of the standards, which brings this conclusion that they do not adopt the standards. They do, and they are willing to adopt the IESA, the IESBA, the sustainability standards as soon as possible. And I think that Mexico as well. So Latin America is moving. They are translating the standards, and we hope to see developments there very soon. We also heard that, correct me if I'm wrong, Canada, Ontario, at least they are moving as well. Of course, there is a political environment which is uncertain, but what we heard at the JSS is that they are very much wanting to adopt the standards, or at least consider the adoption, and they hope to put an exposure draft out relatively soon, or at least they are preparing for that. Middle East, David, thank you for coming with this information. Actually, it has been identified and it's there identified as a priority as well. They are very, very open to our work, not only on sustainability, but also from culture and governance and these things. We were there, Tom and I, 2 months ago, exactly with the purpose of, doing some outreach related mostly to sustainability. David Clark was with us, and the appetite for this is huge and very significant. Now, as David said, Saudi Arabia is an important jurisdiction that we need to address. So we'll see how to do it. There will be a forum or IFAC Connect, I don't know exactly, in Saudi Arabia later this year, and we'll make sure that we'll be there to do something in that respect. Now, this is the information. Now, some comments. First of all, I can't resist looking at this table and see that most of the jurisdictions where this is advancing is represented here at the board. So it's not a coincidence. We see Australia, Brazil, France, India, Italy, Japan, Kenya, Korea, Nigeria, South Africa, and the United Kingdom. This, I think, says something about the great job that these board members are doing, and I'm very grateful to you because it's incredible how this matches, and I'm sure that this is not a coincidence. So, big thank you to all of you. Keep on doing this, being IESBA ambassadors. It's amazing. Secondly, not so happy about what's happening in Europe. Unfortunately, it is what it is. We heard from Christelle, Italy is there, but still they are in that political tsunami where things, it's uncertain in which direction things will go. But still, what I'm hearing is that there are some jurisdictions and some stakeholder groups are not that happy with these developments. I heard it at the Financial Stability Board. The chair of the Financial Stability Board Audit Roundtable, who is the vice governor of the Spanish Central Bank, was absolutely clear about how they they hate these developments. And this is important probably for the ANI working group. I think that the banks can be important drivers of a change of this change. Banks are very much, surprisingly or not, they are very much focused on keeping as much as possible reporting and assurance frameworks. They need it. They need it for risk assessment of their clients and of the operations and all these things. They have to comply with rules where sustainability data and information is still there, has not been removed, and they are in a very difficult situation because to do whatever they have to do, namely, funding initiatives, loaning, and etc. They need to comply with the requirements on risk assessment, client assessment, etc. And then they don't have the data. And with this reduction of the number of the firms, the companies who will be reporting on sustainability, the lack of data will be dramatic. So I think that banks, entities like MICS, Morgan Stanley Investment Company, and things like that, they will be pushing for this. And this is, I don't know if this is good news or bad news, but in Europe, what's happening is that some jurisdictions whose conviction is that they need this information, they are still pushing for sustainability reporting and assurance and drafting their own framework because there is not a uniform framework in Europe these days for sustainability assurance, mostly. So many developments. We don't know what's going to happen with voluntary. Apparently, what's being considered is that for the voluntary reporting and assurance, they will use for the reporting, they will use the ESRS framework for SMEs. That's one thing that they are considering. Assurance, I think it's going to be full voluntary and that there will not be a big change over the next times. So this is what I had on my side, I think. One final note that I'm very happy to see this table here. I think that 4 months before we were doubting that this might happen, considering the strong shift, change politically, etc., the pushback against the sustainability. One thing that I'd like also to highlight, and that became clear mostly from the JSS meeting, is that the world seems to be moving at two different paces. So Europe and North America is, pushing back, deregulating, stopping, and etc., while mostly Middle East and Asia and the Australian, etc., are keeping the pace and moving forward with sustainability reporting, keeping the goals, the objectives, and etc. This will be very interesting because together with other things, I think that this will completely change the geopolitical balance and the composition and etc. There is a lot of investment which apparently is being taken from the West into the East because of the stability that investors see there. So I think that there are some lessons to learn from what's happening here, and hopefully there will be a more balanced and equal situation in the near future with some narratives which are starting to be a little bit less dramatic in terms of abandoning or pushing back on sustainability, and some voices which are not happy with this are coming back and saying what they need to say, namely the banks. And this is something that we should also have in mind because it's an area and a group of stakeholders that we need probably to explore in the sense of connecting more. Sorry, Amajit, I was a bit longer than I expected, but I think that this information is also important for the working group. And I think, Chana, do you want to speak?
I just want to add, I don't know where it is at exactly, but the New Zealand XRB also considered the exposure drafts at the end of last week at their board meeting. I don't know whether Belinda knows whether they have approved it or not, because we sort of came for the meeting here. I mean, I scanned through it. They didn't seem to have done many changes, just New Zealand changes. So it seems pretty consistent with the ISR and the experts as well.
So thank you, Amajit. I'm sorry. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gabriela, for those comments.
Sorry,
and also
Amajit. Sorry, Amajit. Rania still wants to speak. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
please. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to what you were saying is that, I think what will help the adoption of sustainability reporting and, standards and the entire trilogy or suite is the advancement in technology. And actually, recently there has been some data suggesting that satellite imagery can really help in terms of tracking and reporting like carbon emissions and other types of gases. And actually, I think one of the issues that perhaps works against sustainability reporting at the moment is that some data suggests that there is underreporting of carbon emissions. So according to one research organization, carbon emissions are underreported by 2/3. They are 1/3. What is being actually reported is actually 1/3 of the actual, the true amounts. So what I want to say is that I think as technology advances in terms of gathering that information and it becomes more efficient, less costly, and more accurate at the same time, I think that will really help. So what I want to say is that it's coming. It's coming, perhaps, later rather than sooner, but it's on the way. Just
Thank you, Rania. I recently shared an article with Ken and a few people in the staff about that topic. But maybe I can share it with the whole board and etc. It's very interesting, but it's very frightening. Frightening in the sense that it may, if that direction is taken, replacing information being provided by the companies on the basis of standards and etc. by technological technology satellites providing the information, then it's going to be a completely different world. Because what the article, it's a Financial Times article, I think, somehow in a very subtle way says is that if this goes this way, sustainability reporting by the companies and assurance will not be necessary because technology will replace it. So this is opening a completely different discussion, but I think that for now we have to focus. But thank you for bringing it. It's an important development. And I think that you are right. There are some questions about how much reliable are the data and is the information that the companies are using. Sorry, Majid, again, over to you.
Thank you, Gabriela. But thank you for all the comments and also your inputs on the specific jurisdictions which we might have missed. But we will definitely look at the specific countries that you mentioned for factoring it in our priority list. And also, I'll request other board members, in case you feel we are missing out anything here from your region or from your own jurisdiction, just feel free to let us know. We also have a list of ISSB list of 35 jurisdictions, which I've shared with John. And I'm also keeping track of ISSB's engagement with ISCO's GEM committee, Growth and Emerging Markets Committee. They had a meeting with them at the recent annual conference. So they're trying to basically create awareness about ISSB framework and basically a very gentle nudge. There's no hurry there. That's the sense I got. I attended part of the session, and their approach seems to be we are not in a rush. We don't want to race to the top, but let's create awareness and build on that and understand what are their capacity constraints and how ISSB can bridge those constraints and help the jurisdictions move on the reporting path. Before I move to the next slide, I would just like to thank David Clark for opening the doors for us in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and UAE. He was very helpful. In fact, I was engaging with him before I went to Qatar. John, can we move to the next slide, please? So I'll be rather quick here in the interest of time. So what we're trying to tell here through this slide is we are also, as we go along this path, we are also trying to progress our thinking. We are refining our approach and so on. So some of the things which we have very recently brought into our strategy and our approach, jurisdictional prioritization I've already covered, so I'll not talk about that again. In terms of profiling the jurisdictions, here the idea is that can we get a better sense of what the unique characteristics of each jurisdiction are, what is the status, and also can we, basically the idea is that more information, more awareness about the jurisdiction will help us in customizing our outreach and our providing our motivations to them for adopting ISA. In terms of coordination with IFAC, IAASB, and ISSB, I think we've already covered that point. So again, I'll just flag again, just to emphasize that we need to be on the same page in terms of our approach and understanding of various terms that we use. In terms of the timeline and proposed approach, here the idea is, can we have a tailored approach depending upon the jurisdictional characteristics? How do we engage? Some jurisdictions, there may be a need for more awareness building. How do we develop relevant connections in each of the jurisdictions that we are targeting? How do we track the progress? So basically, a little more focused, more tailored approach with some timelines around so that we look at certain outcomes within a given time frame. That's the idea here. And engagement with the IESBA members, I think, as I mentioned, we have in our priority list, we have taken it as one of the factors. And as Gabriela also mentioned, I think we are all ambassadors. So we do double hatting or multi hatting in some sense, and we are all ambassadors of IESBA, and any help in this space would be much appreciated. I guess I am kind of done here. John, can we move to the next slide?
Can I just add a couple of quick points on this slide, if that's okay, Amajit?
Oh, yeah, please supplement. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So just on the jurisdictional profile, so the idea there is, I mean, we've obviously just heard here that each jurisdiction is approaching this in a different way. So, for example, in Australia, they're already well ahead through the adoption process. So, in terms of there, maybe the focus is more on implementation and assistance in that regard. Other jurisdictions, Ken mentioned Brazil, that there's a lot of need for capacity building, those sorts of aspects. So the idea there is to determine how the approach would be for the relevant jurisdictions. But also we want to work closely with IFAC because they have a lot of engagement with the particular jurisdictions through their regional managers. So we want to connect with the IFAC regional managers and make sure that the approach is coordinated and done in that sense. And and the timeline and that approach there is that the adoptions for reporting is different in different jurisdictions as well in terms of the timing in terms of where the jurisdiction. So it might be that we can prioritize different jurisdictions based on the closer timelines in terms of adoption, that sort of thing. So thanks for that. I just wanted to add a couple of points there.
No, thanks, John, for adding. But I'll also request working group members, if I or John have missed out anything, just feel free to step in now and supplement, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Amajit. Now over to you. Is it John?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the prioritization, we've heard from board members in terms of their relevant aspects in their own jurisdictions, but it's just whether there's any comments or in relation to the proposed approach and also all the activities that are we've in the agenda item 4A. So we'll just pause there if there's any other comments from board members.
Yes, Tomoyo, please.
Thank you, Chair. So for Japan, as probably the implementation the pace of implementation, I will say it's moderate, and we are not necessarily the fast runner. I expect some discussion with the stakeholders in Japan about what they think about this prioritization. Sorry, but I cannot talk for Japan. I appreciate that Japan is on the list, but probably as we are not the first runner, maybe some people may hesitate. So I want some discussion with the stakeholders in Japan about prioritization and what kind of corporate coordination we will do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tomoyo. Of course, we know that not all the jurisdictions will move at the same pace, and this is really early days. The standard has been launched in late January. Effective date will be end 2026. So I think that the evolution that we are seeing, it's very significant 3 months after the standard has been launched. So I think it's fine that jurisdictions take their time according to their jurisdictional, national, local constraints and circumstances. But what is encouraging is to see that the appetite, the intention to move is there, and that there are things being put in place and in practice in that direction. And then we hope that by the end of 2026, we will be celebrating the adoption of these standards in many, and the implementation of these standards in many places. Now, I think that it's important just to confirm that the board members are comfortable with the prioritization the proposed jurisdictional prioritization. Of course, as the working group and Amajit mentioned, this is a moving a reality because each day you have more information and sometimes you need to adjust. Maybe this information that we gather, that you gathered here will also inform your next steps. But in general, are you comfortable with this approach, with this proposal? Christelle, please.
I'm comfortable with the proposition. As we are supporting this quite quickly and things are moving quite quickly, I wonder if it might be at some point interesting to share through some communication about the way fast runners are dealing with different examples, as we know that globally there are different situations. Some have the hurdles of the reporting plus the assurance plus the ethics. Other ones may already have something in terms of reporting, but have some hurdles in other aspects. And I think if we could have some elements as testimony on how were these hurdles dealt with, it could be interesting for other jurisdictions, and also it could be enhancing the role of the standard setters into helping to get over these hurdles.
Yes, of course, Christelle. Mark?
Is it just worth saying that as part of the discussions around the JSS meeting, there's a Teams sort of channel that's been set up to help with the sharing of information. So maybe that's something that JSS members can also look to sort of share through that as a way of trying to access that information.
Thank you very much for bringing that, Mark. I think that we do great things that sometimes we forget to say that we do, and that is really a very good initiative. So thank you for mentioning it. It's very, very helpful. Vanya, please.
Thank you, Gabriel. And yes, Chris said, I think it's very useful. And it is also part of the purpose of the capacity building initiative from IFRS Foundation. In Brazil, we created a working group, an educational working group, composed of teachers from several universities that will follow what's happening in Brazil and create case studies so we can feed IFRS Foundation of what's happening and then help other countries that are in the same path of adoption. But I think it's very useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vanya. Tomoyo, do you want to speak? Yeah.
So sorry again. So I just want to avoid the countries that is in the list saying why IESBA is deciding prioritization without consulting with us. So that I understand this is a moving target, may change, but again, I expect such kind of consultation to happen, especially and also for the countries that is not in the list, like China or US, which is the kind of largest countries considering the GDP. Well, maybe the status of adoption might be delayed. I think still some consultation where they find to be not in the list, such kind of consultation I think should happen before deciding. Otherwise, yes, but will be said like, well, deciding without consulting. So that's my concern.
You mean, Tomoyo, without consulting with the individual jurisdictions themselves, or?
Because I cannot speak for, of course, we have JFSA and JICPA, so if they are fine, I'm fine, but I cannot speak for Japan as the representative, and some kind of hesitation I can see in my country. So how can we get consensus is my
Amarjit, do you want to respond? Do you want me to respond?
No, I can actually. So I think, see, if you look at our criteria, it is the size and also the status of sustainability reporting and the status of adopting assurance requirements. Idea is not to really intrude into any jurisdiction and say, look, here we are and you have to adopt it. So I think our criteria itself takes care that there is an appetite, there is a indication, and we are just creating first a layer of awareness. Look, if you are going this path, here is the value proposition from IESBA, and this is in your interest to take this forward. I don't expect any opposition if we follow our criteria properly. In terms of the countries not included, the big markets, you are right on spot there, but for good reasons, we don't want to spend time and resources where, for various reasons, we don't see much traction happening in the near future. So we thought we'll keep them aside. And as we go along and if we see, possibilities of traction there, we'll definitely include them also in the list. But Gabriela, you can please add to what I said.
Thank you, Amarjit. David, please.
Thank you. Maybe I'll just build a little bit on what Amarjit said and just bring us back to something we talked about in the last board meeting, which is this is just about where we prioritize in phase one our very limited resources. So I think to the point that you raised, Tomayan, is a very valid one around, for example, the US. It was actually on the list, just to remind all of you. And what we did is we said, look, from a resource perspective, it's intensive. There doesn't appear to be significant regulatory interest at the moment. That doesn't mean that won't come. And of course, we'll prioritize resources when that interest comes, whether it's market-driven, regulatory-driven, or something else. And I think on the point for China, so China is certainly moving. They actually are doing quite a lot. It may not be necessarily as visible as other countries. So that's one country I think that we'll explore a little bit more potentially in phase two. Once we get, I think, some successes, some insights, and some learnings from this first wave of countries so that we can use that and build and then accelerate with other countries that have interest, because we've already got a playbook, so to speak, around how we can do it. So it really is a function of very limited resources and just being realistic about what we can do and going where there's strong appetite and pull, and then using that insight to build. So I just want to add that a little bit for context to remind us of what we've talked about.
So just adding to what Amarjit and David said as well, obviously one of the criteria there is where there is an IESBA member present. So obviously, and that goes back to the sort of strategic plan that we put there together, is around engaging with the board members in terms of assisting us with the profiling, ensuring what the profiling right for a jurisdiction, and obviously, and who are the right stakeholders, who are the right people to meet with, engage with, all that sort of thing. So we obviously want to leverage that resource that we have within the board as well. So just wanted to make that point too. But also, just in relation to Chris Hill's comment, that is also part of that jurisdictional profile that we're talking about, is maybe for external purposes as well. It needs to be carefully considered, but in terms of developing that and potentially publishing, as you mentioned, like the different, how they've gone through the process and achieved adoption or implementation, those sorts of things. But that's certainly part of that jurisdictional profile, is actually an external aspect of it as well. So yeah, just wanted to note that as well. Thanks.
So just to add, sorry, I'm again just coming in here. So, inclusion in the list, if I can just add, does not in any manner cause any obligation on any of those jurisdictions to adopt. Even IESBA, the way they've approached it, in fact, they've been reaching out to India. They've been talking to me also, in my capacity as a SEBI person, as to why we are not adopting. We are not obliged. I mean, we give them some answer, fine, we have our own framework, we are looking at your framework and so on. So what I'm trying to say is that when it comes to developing our own strategy for reaching out, for outreach, we are free to sort of go by the publicly available data and include in our list for the purpose of reaching out, engaging with the jurisdiction. But in any manner, it is not causing, it does not lead to any obligation, any implicit obligation on the part of the jurisdiction to adopt. I thought I'll just clarify.
Thank you very much, Amajit. Obichukwu, please.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the working group for the good work. I'm happy with the prioritization. I just want to give a suggestion on the activities. So I'm very happy with the webinars. I attended some of it, and that was a good move. I just want to add that I think we can also do more by collaborating with IESB in the webinars and including real life cases with the two IESB and IASB, like they did in the ISSB did. They have these webinars that come out almost monthly or quarterly, and there'll be IFRS because of the financial reporting standards, and then the stability standards. There'll be a real case. They'll give a real example, and then they'll now speak on how both standards can be applied. So I'm just saying that I think it also be a good thing to do with the standards, the assurance standards, and the ISA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Obichukwu. And I apologize, Otomoy, because I think you wanted to react to Amajit, so please do.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Amajit. So, yes, I just want to, I think this is a good thing, and IESBA is trying to provide support. So I want this to be understood correctly by the prioritized countries, and I think we can discuss offline how to do that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tomoyo. Yohai, please.
This is not very good timing to talk about Japan, but I would like to briefly share what's going on in Japan. So in March 2025, SSBJ released S1S2, which is in alignment with IFRS S1S2. And we are in the discussion for the when to incorporate the mandatory disclosure. And it is not formally agreed, but the direction is that we are implementing the step-by-step approach, and that the biggest companies will be mandated to disclose the March 2027. And of course, at the same time, we are discussing for the mandated sustainability assurance, which is very tough to discuss, but I hope I could update soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yohai. Yes, these things are not easy anywhere, because different responsible entities for the adoption and implementation decisions are being made. So thank you very much for the update, Yohai. Very, very significant. And again, I think that the IESBA is not making decisions. We are, and the working group, as Amajit said, is working based on criteria, and then the connections that we have with the jurisdictions. But of course, all these comments and suggestions are very welcome to help refine our strategy. Now, I just wanted to say, I don't know exactly where the presentation is going now. I don't know if it's the right time. Oh, it's time now. So that one comment, and it has not to do with sustainability. I think that we can conclude that the board agrees with the direction, with the prioritization, generally activities and etc. I'd just like to raise another topic to the adoption and implementation group, which is the following. We have a standard becoming effective by the end of this month, tax. It's good to remember to remind this group that this standard is becoming effective, and as far as we know, in a very random way, there are developments in many places that we are probably not aware. It might be good to have some kind of quick assessment or understanding of what's happening in the different jurisdictions. I know, for instance, it has been adopted in Australia, the first ones. I think that it was adopted in South Africa as well. Oh, first, no, sorry. South Africa first, the champions. I heard that in Japan there was a consultation, so I suppose that so there is information, but it's random information. We would like to promote this properly. This is a very important area that, again, we have been forgetting a little bit in this tsunami, but it's an important standard. And it's making its way, as far as I understand, by itself. I'm always stumbling into news and things about things being done about the ethics standards. So I think it's time to take stock of what is being done. At least some information, a little bit structured information about this. If the board members can help, that's fine. If you send information, but also if the working group might do just a very quick and not very structured but try to understand what's happening with the standard, it would be good, because by the end of the month, we should be relaunching the standard, which is another term that we need to include in our activities. Sorry. And I'll stop here, not give John and Amajit time to react to this proposal and move forward to I think John or Sylvia, I don't know who is the next one.
I think before we turn to the IMAG, I would just like to call Luigi, who, as Gabriela mentioned, will be the chair of the newly established IMAG, to say some words about the group. Luigi?
Yeah, thank you. Really few words on my side. In the last weeks, we went on interacting with the adoption implementation group in order to search for their advice and recommendation in order to start composing the group that will serve as, let's say, sounding board, collection of issues, challenges, implementation, in order to discharge the responsibility set forth in the terms. And we try to, well, we believe, but we try to implement all the recommendation we receive in order to compose this group. And now Sylvia would explain how we went on this duty. Please, Sylvia.
Thank you, Luigi. So as you may remember, in March, the board approved the term of reference of the Implementation Monitoring Advisory Group, sorry, the IESA Implementation Monitoring Advisory Group that we call IMAG. And the main purpose of the IMAG is to exchange information and views about the practical challenges related to the actual or planned adoption and implementation of the IESA, and really provide insight to the board's discussion on that matter. So the plan is that IESA will serve as a sounding board, in the sense recommending the board whether there is any need for a quick response. But going beyond that, if there is any need for a quick response, the IMAG will participate and provide input in developing any potential NAM or supporting material as well. So that's the main purpose that the board dedicated to the IMAG. And once the plan is that the IMAG will meet virtually in every quarter. And we are hopeful that once you agree to the members, we can start the operation as soon as possible. Hopefully in the next quarter, we can set up our first meeting. As we mentioned, the meeting will be chaired by Luigi, and IESBA will provide, IESBA staff will provide the support to the IMAG. So once we start the operation, there will be a close coordination between the ANI working group and the IMAG. And also the IMAG will provide regular updates on the IESBA as well, given that it will serve as to work as a sounding board. there is one of the key characteristics or objective that there would be a really close coordination between the IMAG and IAASB similar technical group, the TICGA, because they're of course, the ISSA 5000 and IMAG are so closely related. So there will be observers in each groups in IMAG and TICG as well to exchange information. Just FYI, the first TICG meeting was actually yesterday that I observed, and there were a couple of ethics-related issues that were already raised up. So it was a really, really good discussion. So based on that and the terms of reference, as Luigi mentioned, the board asked the A&I working group to carry out the recruitment and decide on the membership. So the A&I working group decided on the selection criteria in line with the terms of preference. One of the most important criteria was that we should have a diverse mix of members, but based on geography as well, but also on the professional background. So we should cover all stakeholders group. Given that this group will be really technical and focusing on the details of the ISA, it is important that the members be familiar with the implementation of the ISA or in other IESBA independent standards as well. And the other important point was that although the members will be in their individual capacity, we would like them to have access to a larger network or stakeholders group, so they could collect all the information from that stakeholders group. And although we said that there is a diverse mix geographically, indeed, at the first round, we focused on countries where they already started the planning of the adoption and the implementation. So you will see that in the members, we have quite a few members from Australia. So just to ensure that we would get the information at the start that we are necessary. So based on these criteria, the IESBA staff, we started to reach out to board members, key stakeholders for recommendation, and also at the JSS meeting, we had a call for interest from JSS members to recommend candidates for that group. So the A&I working group discussed the list of candidates, and for the 12 seats that we currently planned, we managed to find 9 candidates at the moment, which the group believes it's fine because it's still early days of the adoption. So probably over time, we can include more candidates, more jurisdictions or more stakeholders group will be involved. But nevertheless, the suggestion of the A&I group and the staff as well that we start the operation with this limited number of members, because it's really, there are questions out there that we need to respond, and we can find more members later on. So having said that, there is a list of the members that the A&I working group approved on the screen. In alphabetical order. So you can see Antonio Astone. Antonio was nominated by the AIF. He's a sustainability assurance practitioner. Also, he's a member of the sustainability reference group and was member of the ISO standard setting group on sustainability. So Antonio is really aware of our work. Next, Karen. Karen is the managing director, Global Independence Group at KPMG, and she's the lead in KPMG's global implementation of IESBA standards. Liesel, she's from IRBA, a manager from IRBA, so she could represent the regulatory view, but also Liesel is a member of the PAFA Audit Assurance and Ethics Advisory Group. Liz is from Australia, was nominated by also from the SMP advisory group, and she is really active in that field in Australia, already provided input to the IESA, and she is a quality assurance consultant. Andrew Kerr, managing director in PwC's US Independence Office, and he is a key independent subject matter expert for the PwC sustainability practice in the US. Kingsley Chang was nominated by the Hong Kong Institute of CPAs. He's a member of the sustainability committee in Hong Kong Institute of CPAs, but also head of ESG at a listed corporation. Murray Sauerbay, he is the ethics leader at Deloitte in Australia. Raphael Saval, He will represent the preppers, the CFO perspective. He's been a group CFO and CFO at many corporations. And finally, Isabel, it was really familiar, this name to the group. Isabel was an IEESB member, participated in the development of ISSA 5000, also representing SNCC at JSS, and he's also the Global Sustainability Professional Practice Director at EY. So this is the list, and sorry, it's really hard to summarize the CV of these really of these names. So it's just to represent that we believe that this list of individuals will really bring all the knowledge, skills, and experience, and also connections to the network that we need at the moment. So I think I will just stop here quickly to turn to the group. And apologies, I will also turn to Amarjit to see if there's anything from the A&I. Oh, apologies, Amarjit. I didn't give you a heads up that I will call you. So if there's anything to add from the A&I working group's perspective on the recruitment process.
No, I think we are happy with the outcome here, and my sense is IIMAG can very nicely complement what A&I is trying to do. We can work together, and especially, in terms of dealing with the noise, in terms of getting to the bottom of things that we keep hearing that there are issues and it's very complex, it's very long. So we are not really getting a very specific set of issues to deal with. So, and also, in terms of creating awareness and also in terms of removing doubts and helping the jurisdictions in some sense also contributing to capacity building. I think a variety of things which are possible. So the huge potential here. And also, it's such an enormous task, if I can say. It's a huge task. And more we spread out in terms of different geographies, different practitioners, different set of stakeholders who are getting included here. So I think I'm quite pleased with what we have on the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amarjit. Ken, please.
Yes, I'll be very brief. This is an excellent group, by the way, and fully endorse your comment, Amarjit. But I just wanted to bring to the board's attention that, in fact, one of the members of the IMAG is here with us. It's Karen Boone, who's at the back. In case you've not had a chance to introduce yourself, by all means, do so during the break. And Karen, thank you for being available and being willing to join this group. Looking forward to your contributions. And the other observation I just bring to the board's attention is that Marisa Orbea used to be a board member on IESBA. So in fact, she chaired our long association project. So you can be sure that she will be very familiar with our code and essentially the ESA as well. So looking really forward to her contributions.
Thank you, Ken. David, please.
Thank you. Just to let you know, one of the things we've been doing with Sylvia and team and with Luigi is we're looking as well at seeing if we can get some representation from the investor community, because that's a large constituency group as well. So we're looking to see how we can add to the list over time. And we're also looking to see if we can potentially find a good resource as well from China, which I think speaks a little bit earlier to Moyo's comment. So we're looking for some additional areas that perhaps we haven't had consistent representation from before as an opportunity. So I just wanted to share that as well.
Thank you, David. China, please.
So this is a very good list. I mean, I know some other people as well, so I endorse what Ken is saying. I think one thing is that this is heavily weighted towards practitioners and regulators, and we need some CFOs here as well. Because the CFOs are essentially the people who do it first, because they have to prepare the information before somebody audits it. And we also got similar comments in our Australian exposure draft, and then we did a bit of research. And a lot of the bigger companies One example is BHP, which is Australia's biggest company. They have a 50-page document on what their scope 1, 2, and 3 methodology is. So, they are way ahead. And so the preparers, we need some preparers in here to give some balance. So that's my concern or comment.
Thank you very much, Chana. We have one, Rafael Saval, who was at the summit with us, but it's a good point that we need to have those who deal with the preparation of the information. Rich, I'm sorry, I'm rushing a little bit, but we are getting.
Yeah. So I think that my point, which you and Chana just made, is that the important thing for this group is people who are day-to-day practically involved with the preparing, the auditing, and the assessment of the independence on this thing. I think this is not a group we want to get a lot of people who are far removed from that, because we are only going to we're going to most benefit from hearing what the real day-to-day on the ground issues are from this group. Thank you.
Yes, I think that we fully agree with that, but I think that so far we have achieved that objective, and it was very much the objective to have the ones who have their hands dirty with the topic. So,
did you want to come in, David?
Thank you, Ken. I'll just add one comment. So Gabriela has already acknowledged that there is CFO representation, but the network that's behind Rafael is over 30,000. So we've actually got quite a large pool, but that said, Chana, if there are specific CFOs that you think would be incredibly helpful, we can certainly supplement with some additional ones. But I just want to give people context. It's not one CFO. Rafael also has extensive experience in doing sustainability reporting because in his organization, they've integrated it. So to Rich's point, he has definitely got his hands dirty, and I think he's well skilled.
And in addition, which is also important, he seemed very excited about everything. So I think that a little bit of enthusiasm and confidence it's also needed. So Sylvia, please, over to you.
If there is no more comment on the members, I also just wanted to note that we also launched a digital platform. Probably you have seen on the LinkedIn that it's up and running. So if you are having outreach or you get a question, you can also direct it to this person to fill out the form. And as the board agreed, because that's what we presented in March as well, we included a disclaimer and explained to those who are submitting their comments that it's really to inform the IMAG's work, and we are looking for issues for international relevance. So it's on the webpage. I encourage you to have a look at it. And yes, so I just wanted to note that before we end the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. If you weren't going to mention it, I would, because it's really, again, a very important mechanism and instrument that we are putting at the service of investors. A risky one, by the way. Of course, we try to mitigate risk, but we know that these open things can bring whatever they can bring. So we are what we are. So it's really putting ourselves in a very open and humble way, accepting what stakeholders may want to say. But it's an incredibly innovative and instrument, and something that speaks by itself about the IESBA's position towards stakeholder engagement, feedback, and etc. It's putting it live instead of just speaking and saying that we are very open and that we are very engaging. It tests that position. So again, I also encourage you to look at it and of course promote it as much as possible. Sylvia, John, Amajit, do you want to close the session, please?
No, just 30 seconds. I just want to thank the working group members, David, Vanya, Rania, Sadia. Also want to thank Deepa. And last but not the least, I think they are the ones who are doing all the heavy lifting, John and Elaine. Thank you for all the work.
Thank you, Amajit, for the kind words. Recognition is also is always very important. So thank you for that. And I also want to again recognize and thank Luigi for the availability to chair and the generosity of making himself available to chair this important group. We are very grateful for that as well. So thank you very much. We are going to close here. We have someone from IESB joining us, and that's why I'm rushing, because we are going to be late for the next session. So I think that we have already informed them that we'll be 10 minutes late. But
Yeah, I've indicated, in fact, we're running 15 minutes behind. So maybe I'd suggest that we start at 11:15. Chair.
Is it okay for IESB?
Well, I'm going to check with them. This is just upstairs. Oh, 11:10. Okay, fair enough. So 11:10 then.
Okay, 11:10.
Okay.
20 minutes. I'm sorry, 20 minutes. We'll be back at 11:10. So, welcome back to the meeting. I'm very sorry for the short delay and the shorter break that you were provided, but we have Willy Botta from IESB, the Senior and Program Director from IESB, joining us this morning to provide us with an update on the IESB's work on the PI Track 2. We will also have attending virtually, as far as I know, Isabel Reich and Ida Gio from IESB staff team, and also Stu Allman, IESB member. So welcome to the IESBA board this week. Thank you very much for taking time to provide us with an update on a very important matter that has been keeping us busy. And sometimes, busy over the last times. It's very important for the IESBA to know about the developments on the IESB side and try to make the best on both sides to make sure that this works for the adopters of the standards and for the users. So, Willy, without further ado, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabriela, and thank you, everyone. Very happy to be here, and I really appreciate the fact that I've got my own table, so that's nice. So we've got PI on the agenda again. So you will remember that last year in December, I updated this board on what happened on our project of the exposure draft. And that was also the week before our board meeting. So today I want to continue the journey with you and update you a little bit on where we are. So we're almost starting there on the timeline just outside the block that says April to November 2024. So last time I spoke with you, we spent quite a bit of time on highlighting that, the respondents or certain respondents to our comment, to our exposure draft highlighted an issue of divergence between the IESB standards, or at least the proposals that we had in our ED, compared to how it will work with how it will work under the IESBA PI revisions read together with the clarification. Since then, and that's where the block comes in, so that is the piece that you haven't heard yet. What we've done is we had our discussion at the December meeting, so I will update you a little bit of what happened at the December meeting. I will also tell you a little bit about what happened in Q1, what we've been busy with, and then next week we have our board meeting where this item is on the agenda. So hopefully that will be helpful, and obviously I will take anything from this meeting. I will also highlight to our board next week. So just a reminder, and this is not new because we did touch on this, but just to give you the perspective of how our board considered the feedback at our December meeting. And in essence, it came down to that our board had to consider how are we going to move forward in terms of our listed entity and PI project. And in doing that, we basically considered three pathways. So the first one was the ED path. So the one that was the one where we say, well, we could continue to just implement what we had in the ED. So we implement all the elements that we had in the ED, which was just as a reminder that we would adopt the PI definition, which is the same as the IESBA definition. We will adopt the PTE definition. We will accommodate the role of local bodies to introduce refinements to the categories of the PI definition, which include PTEs. We would incorporate an overall objective and purpose for establishing differential requirements in the ISAs and ISQMs, again, consistent with the objective and purpose within the code. And then also, we will then consider on a case-by-case basis to extend differential requirements that currently apply only to listed entities to apply to PI. So those were all the elements of our proposals. So the board's decision in the end was that given the identified divergence issue, the board felt that it was not appropriate to continue with that path because we would in essence be going beyond the IESBA code, and we will end up with the same definition, but the application of those definitions under the two board standards will result in different outcomes. So the board then considered what we refer to as the conditional path, and that would mean in an attempt to achieve the same outcome as one would achieve under applying the IESBA PI revisions read together with the IESBA clarification into our ISQMs and ISA standards by introducing conditional requirements in terms of the application of the PI definition, and that will flow through to the application of the differential requirements. So after discussion, the board decided that this is not an appropriate path to pursue at this stage, because this will put us basically in the same position that we had been previously in terms of deciding not to have a PI definition in our standards. Specifically, the board highlighted that it will lead to jurisdictional variations across multiple classes of entities. Certain mandatory categories may not apply in the application of our differential requirements. And most importantly, the board was concerned whether this was opening a door and creating a precedent risk for our standards in terms of our standards design, where we require that, remember, we write performance standards in terms of how to perform an engagement to get evidence as a support for your conclusion and expressing your opinion in your auditor's report. And so we have a standards design that says you have to comply with every requirement in the ISAs. If you want to claim that you've done your audit in accordance with the ISAs, you have to comply with every requirement in the ISAs. And the board was concerned about the possible precedent risk, not just related to PI, but in terms of anything going forward. You know, that there may be, because we've then created the precedent for this, there may be calls or pressure on us under certain circumstances, and yes, it is hypothetical, but to introduce requirements that would only be applied that if law regulation or professional requirements have determined those requirements apply. And based on that, the board said, no, we're not going to pursue the conditional path. So the last path we considered was the PTE path, to say, well, let's adopt the PTE definition as a replacement term for listed entity. And the board felt that at this time, this was the most feasible solution. But the board also wanted to make it clear that they do stay committed to all the elements of the original ED proposal. So for the time being, he said, adopting PTE addresses the concerns that were previously identified with the term listed entity. So we believe there's benefit in that. We also said that not having a PI definition in our standards for the time being is a pre-existing difference with the code that has not seemed to create any issues. So it will be the same situation. And then also jurisdictions can always decide to add on, which some jurisdictions have already done, incidentally. So where we then landed is the board agreed on a final position that was reflected in what we refer to as the pre-final narrow scope amendments for this project, which then boils down to we've adopted the PTE definition in the format of a core definition with essential explanatory material that explains for purposes of the ISQMs and ISAs, local bodies may define more explicitly PTEs. We've incorporated the objective and purpose exactly the same as in the ethics code for establishing differential requirements, that your key consideration is that if there is occasion to consider differential requirements, it has to be related to significant public interest in the financial condition of an entity. And we've incorporated that same objective purpose along with a framework for auditors or firms to consider when it may be appropriate to apply those differential requirements to entities other than, in this case, then PTEs. We've also amended all the extant differential requirements. Now, I just have to qualify. If I say all the extant differential requirements, it sounds a lot. There are 6. We are talking about 6 requirements in the whole book of ISAs. Now with fraud and going concern being approved, there's 2 more, but it's very limited because remember, we've always been very careful not to introduce differential requirements, especially when they relate to performance requirements. If they relate to communication with those charged with governance or the auditor's report, yes, but we don't want to introduce it at the performance level because then you start talking about 2 different types of audits. But for those 6 requirements and then extending it after the approval of going concern and fraud, those differential requirements will now going forward not apply to listed entities, but to publicly traded entities as defined. And like I said, the core definition is exactly the same between the 2. And we definitely also wanted to put on record our commitment to all the elements of the ED, and specifically to revisit the decision to adopt the PI definition at a future date when the adoption of the IESBA definition has achieved a level of maturity. So that's where our board landed. However, that wasn't the end of the story, because our board also said, because of the timing issue, remember our exposure draft closed on April 8 last year. You had your discussion about the PI clarification in March. And so certain respondents picked up on that and highlighted to us, but now there's an issue with, we're going to get to different outcomes. But there was a concern that not all stakeholders may have been aware of that. And then the other item is that obviously the position that the board took was different from the position than we presented in the ED. So we decided to do a post-exposure consultation to bring to update our community and make them aware of our position and the rationale for that position. So we went out on a 45-day consultation period, which closed on March 27, and we basically asked our stakeholders to share with us any observations they believe might be relevant before we finalize the narrow scope amendments. And we also asked them specific questions about a few forward-looking matters. So after the closure of the invitation to comment, so we did the post-exposure consultation in the form of an invitation to comment, we received 37 responses, and on this slide is reflected the responses per stakeholder category, as well as the geographical spread of the responses. Important to note that what is not on the slide is originally on the ED, we received 46 responses. So 37 now on the ITC compared to the original 46. Also very important, 30 of the respondents to the ITC also responded to the ED, which then addresses the concern that if they weren't aware, well, they are aware now, and they responded. So what did they say? And so this I'm sharing with you, but obviously with the caveat that our board has obviously not discussed this yet. We will discuss that next week. So on the first question, in terms of any observations before we finalize our narrow scope amendments based on the PTE path, there was broad support for the IESB position and the rationale for that position in pursuing the PTE path over the other two paths. Some of the more specific observations or suggestions or the themes that came out of the comment letters, and I just want to highlight here, in all those instances, those were a few respondents. We're talking 2, 3, or 4 respondents that raised these issues. But obviously, we don't count votes. We also look at the merit of what they say. We look at the merit of what they're saying. So there were comments of saying, well, they doubt whether this actually has real value then, and is there, and they think there's limited benefit from just adopting the PTE definition. We are arguing that we don't agree with that. We believe that there were issues highlighted with the listed entity definition, and therefore we do believe it is relevant to replace listed entity with PTEs. Some highlighted that the difference between the outcomes goes back to a fundamental difference between the standards design of the two boards in terms of how the two board standards deal with departures from or conflicts between provisions in the standard and those in law or regulation. And so what we are saying is, yes, I mean, that difference is a reality. There's also a good fundamental reason for that difference, because our standards are written for different purposes. But we also said, but that was exactly one of the reasons why we said we need to revisit it later when the adoption of the PI definition has sort of reached a critical mass, and we believe the time is right to globalize that definition. Then there were a few comments about the concern that we had a core definition with essential explanatory material, which we do have in our standards. Admittedly, this essential explanatory material is a little bit different from what we normally have in our standards if we use that construct. However, we previously in the ED had a core definition and then with a requirement that said apply the definition. And the respondents to our ED said, but that's redundant, or doesn't make sense, or is confusing. And that's why we changed to a core definition with essential explanatory material. So we will hear what the board says. We're proposing to stick with that construct because we also say that it was always on the table that we had to accommodate that local bodies should be able to refine the categories, or in this case, the PTE definition. And then there were a few drafting suggestions. There were three. Two of them we've taken on board. One we believe wasn't necessary to take on board. So the project team's recommendation to the board is that we continue with our final position as we agreed in December. But obviously that's for the board to decide next week. And basically the decision in front of the board is you reach the position in December. Is there any compelling argument for you to change that position? And that is what the board needs to decide next week. On the other more specific questions, forward-looking questions, we asked a question about the effective date, which we always had in mind to be December 15, 2026, which is also the effective date of our going concern and fraud standards. And because all three of those things have an impact on the audit report, we believed it was good to sort of have those all become effective at the same date. So there was overwhelming support for that. One respondent didn't respond to that question, but 32 out of the other 36 agreed with that we should continue with that as being the effective date. Then maybe just one thing I can mention on the previous slide. There was an issue that was raised by a couple of respondents, but we believe that is solved with allowing early adoption of the proposals. And that was to say that, remember, the code already came into effect in December 2024. So there are certain entities that are PTEs, but ours only becomes effective in December 2026. So we still have listed entities until 26. But as you know, not all listed entities are PTEs. And to sort of just balance the scales, they said, well, if you allow us to early adopt, we will probably consider early adopting, so we get rid of that difference within our firm. And we are very comfortable to say we'll allow early adoption. And then we asked two questions, but in the end, based on it's better to just look at them together. We asked about, do respondents agree with us revisiting our decision to adopt the PI definition and with the timing of that? Now, our original proposal with the timing was to come back to our board in the second half of 2026. So interesting, there was general support for revisiting the decision, but the majority of respondents did not agree with the timing. So the respondents basically told us, listen, that doesn't make sense. You're not going to find out anything more between now and the second half of 2026. And in any case, it's not effective because IESBA is in any case planning to do a post-implementation review. Why don't you just align? And there was therefore a very strong call for joint action between the IESB and IESBA. So what we are proposing for the board next week is that we are proposing joint action, subject obviously to the agreement between the two boards. So at the moment, yes, Ken and I have been coordinating, and if you want to have a look, it is in paragraph 52 of our issues paper. But the boards also need to agree, and we also have a planning committee meeting tomorrow, and we will discuss that. But so subject to all of that, the basic elements of the joint action is depicted on this slide, and it will basically comprise our first coordination between IESB and ethics staff, as well as the two planning committees, to make sure that we properly integrated this joint action into the activity that ethics is in any case going to undertake in terms of a post-implementation review. The second one is we have to be very clear. We can say that jointly, we want our actions to culminate in achieving to the greatest extent possible convergence between the underlying the definitions and underlying concepts in the two board standards. However, there are dual purposes, because the purpose of ethics will be to do a post-implementation review, as one would normally do a post-implementation review. Our purpose will be information gathering and fact-finding so that we can take an informed decision about the adoption of the PI definition into our standards, and whether we have reached that critical mass to have to globalize it in our standards and to then look again at our differential requirements. We're also proposing that it may make sense to have a joint PI project team with staff from both boards and at least one board advisor from each board. And then that joint project team will present their work to both boards. And for practical reasons, yes, in an ideal world, it will be nice to always do it jointly, but we know our meetings are not always aligned. So for practical reasons, it may be that the joint project team will go to both the board meetings, and sometimes, if it makes sense, we can also have joint meetings. So those are the basic elements of the joint action. But like I said, it is subject to agreement between the two boards and the two chairs and everything. So I guess that is where we are. So that's the update from my side, and we'll see how the discussion goes next week. And Gabriella, happy to receive any questions or observations.
Thank you very much, Vili, for the very clear presentation. I think it couldn't be, it's crystal clear. The problem is, the issue is, it is what it is, but the presentation was absolutely clear, and I think that the board members should be by now in a position to take position. But before that, I'd like to see if Ken wants to add something, because you have been working together on this topic. I don't feel that you have to, but if you need to say anything in addition, Ken, please do.
No, I think Vili has set out the pathway forward quite clearly. Just to be sure that everybody understands that the acronym PTE means publicly traded entity, just in case no one really sort of fully understood. But that's really the proposed path forward. And clearly, the question that's on the table is for the board to consider joint action, as Vili has indicated, relative to the post-implementation review. Because as Vili has indicated, our revised definition and the accompanying provisions in the code just came into effect last year, and we're going to need to allow time for those provisions to bed down and settle in, and to have practitioners implementing the revised provisions. And then we can come in a few years down the road. I think we have earmarked the post-implementation review sometime in 2027, Jeff, is based on the forward work plan, the PIR for PI. 27, so that's in about 2 years' time. That will hopefully give us enough time to have the information having been accumulated, so that we can then do the proper analysis and so forth. But the important point is, as Vili has indicated, that this ought to be undertaken jointly, so that we have a shared sort of a common approach and shared objectives as well. Plus, of course, Vili has indicated on your side, you have the other objective as well, which is really to gather the necessary information relative to what you need for IESB's purposes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ken. So I will now open the floor for comments or questions from the board members. Nancy, please.
Thank you, Chair. And Willie, thank you. That was a really excellent presentation, very clear, very supportive of the joint efforts. I think it makes a lot of sense. I do have a question for you, and it's a question that came out of preparing for this meeting, along with some discussions about the IEESB discussions and vote next week on PTE. And the discussion and the question I have for you, I thought I understood this, but I want to make sure that I understand this, because it does seem that I was getting feedback from some folks that had a different interpretation. And that is about the local jurisdictional refinement to the definition of PTE. And so I think several jurisdictions, and the US being one of them, defined the PTE as a category, and then further refined PTE as when it would be a PI specific to the definition of PI. And so what we kind of loosely phrase this is that when we would apply the ethics and independence requirements under IESBA for PIs, we would apply those to PTEs that are PIs as further refined. And I think I'm pretty clear that that is the right approach. I believe that UK and Canada might also have done something somewhat similar. But in talking to some folks who have a lot more knowledge than I do about the IEESB approach, I have heard comments that they believe that no, in that case, you would look at that category definition of PTE without the further refinement within the definition of pi. And so all of these differential requirements under IAASB would be applied to all PTEs. And I didn't think that was the right answer, but since we had the opportunity here, and I do think that this is a very important level of understanding, is if there is a difference here, I thought I would pose the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Vanya, please.
Thank you. Really very good presentation. I was just wondering about the content of the letters that you received as a result of the post-exposure consultation. If there is something in there that bring you to believe that the board will change the decision taken last December, or if there is no possibility of that happening.
Thank you, Vanya. Billy, are you okay with collecting a few other questions? Do you want to respond now? Okay, Rich, please.
Yeah, I have a couple of items. Building off of Nancy's, and I'm going to put this in more practical terms. I think what I had stakeholders tell me last week is some people are reading there's a difference between how a PTE is defined when you apply the IESBA standard and how a PTE would be defined when you apply what I guess you changed the definition in the draft IAASB. I've read both. I can't see how there should be a difference, and I hope that's people just incorrectly parsing the words and not looking for a loophole. But I would say I don't see how, and as I read it, my view would be there is no difference between the two in terms of what entity would be considered a PTE, either for providing the differential requirements or the independence requirements. But Willie, maybe you want to make sure, maybe you can think about whether the IAASB wants to be clear that that's their view also on that point. My second question is, and you said something that caught me off guard, because I also had stakeholders calling me up through yesterday complaining about that they weren't allowed to early adopt. And I think I heard you say you are going to allow early adoption, and apparently there's some confusion in the marketplace on that. So just sharing that for whatever that's worth. And then my last comment would be, I do think, because I will add on that. I do think if they can early adopt, it's going to take some confusion out of the marketplace among preparers, those charged with governance, and PAs. In terms of the longer term project proposal, I actually think that's a nice model. I know it's the first time we're hearing about that, either as our PI implementation group hasn't discussed it. I don't think the planning committee has at the board, but my reaction is that's not just a nice model for this, but might be a nice model we could use in other projects that have the kinds of significant overlap that this one turned out to have. So thank you, Gabrielle.
Thank you, Rich. Really, I think it's better that you take these three questions because there are a lot of things in them. So please.
And my first page is full, so I will have to turn to that page. All right, so thank you. I've heard both from Nancy and Rich support for the joint action, and we will certainly continue to work on that. But then maybe, Nancy, on your specific question, and Rich, you also provide an angle to the same question. So in our minds, let me put it this way. So we have a core definition of PTE, and that definition is, to Rich, to your point, is word for word the same as the definition in the IESBA code. There's nothing different. And then we have essential explanatory material that says, for the purposes of the ISAs and the ISQMs, a local body could more explicitly define that definition by a reference to different security markets, different classes of entity size criteria. And again, that is exactly consistent with how the code describes how the category of PTE in the PI definition could be defined. So in my mind, you come to the same answer. So to put it differently, our intent is exactly the same, that you have according to the core definition, you have a big universe of PTEs. But for purposes of the ISKMs and ISAs and the IESBA code, you can narrow that in terms of which entities the differential requirements will apply to. And then I think, Rich, to your point, and I will certainly bring this up in our board, because in my mind, the intention and one of our project objectives was to achieve convergence to the greatest extent possible. Okay, we didn't get to pi, but we at least got to PTE. So that objective still applies. And one of the reasons why our board didn't want to pursue certain of the other paths was because it will result in different outcomes. So I will definitely take this to the board, but in my mind, the intent would be that you get to the same answer. And I'm a little bit concerned if you say there's a possibility of, okay, we can treat certain entities as PTEs for the IESBA code, but that will not necessarily be the same that we treat for the ISKMs and ISAs. That's an odd conclusion. but I will confirm the intent, and even if we have to maybe write it into our basis for conclusion to make sure that people understand that is our intent, I think that's important. Then on the early adoption point, Vanya, I'll come back to yours about the comment letters just now. On the early adoption point, and Rich, you're right. So there's a little bit of nuance here. So because I said we are looking at the fraud standard, going concern, and the PI narrow scope amendments, the board said that early adoption is allowed, but it is preferable that if you consider early adoption, that you adopt these three standards as a package to avoid differences in the audit reports that will go out in the market. Now, just yesterday, I've been communicating with the past chair of the Going Concern Task Force, the past chair of the Fraud Task Force, because this is an issue. So we are going to clarify that in the basis for conclusion for fraud and PI, that we're not mandating that you adopt it as a package. We say that is preferable. We encourage that. But obviously, if a jurisdiction says, no, we're not ready for fraud and going concern yet, but we do want to sort out this issue with the PTE and certain listed entities not being PTEs in this 2-year transition period, there would be no barrier to them to adopt that. So we will clarify that. And then, Vanya, yours about the comment letters. So as I said in the slides, let me just go back to that one. This is the critical one. So although we had those 4 specific themes that came up, the project team did consider that, and we're presenting arguments for the board why we think that our recommendation is to the board. We think that the final position of the board was the right one. But obviously, it's for the board to decide whether they believe there's a compelling argument to change their position.
Thank you very much, Vili. Now, Mark, please.
Thank you, and thank you for the update. Certainly, I absolutely endorse the ongoing proposal for close working between the boards. In a sense, we are where we are. If only we'd had that sort of a number of years ago, it would have helped us enormously. What you just said in responding to Rich, Vili, about the board's intent with how the PI definition, if we could just sort of snatch that from the transcript and make sure that that was in your basis for conclusions, that would be enormously helpful, because we do get quite a lot of questions, particularly, because our PI definition is one that comes from European law, so it's very much tied in with a regulated market. And then sort of below that, you have the issue of quoted entities, other listed entities. And in a sense, where we get to is ultimately they could be one and the same. But I do think that framing piece with what you said about the board's intent is going to be particularly helpful. And also, and hating to add extra work on, but as you articulated it, sort of having a one-pager that basically could be handed out to all and sundry would be enormously helpful. I also think your point about the early adoption piece as a package, absolutely right, and that's what we're looking at in the context of the arrangements with our own board when we get around to adopting revised standards for the UK.
Thank you, Mark. And just reiterating that I will certainly take that point about the intent of the outcome to our board. I can also maybe highlight another support for that is that you now have the PTE, but in all cases of the differential requirements, we have application material that says the firm may determine that it is appropriate to apply those differential requirements to entities other than PTEs. And one of the factors that we say firms could consider is whether the entity is treated as a public interest entity for purposes of relevant ethical requirements. So we already have that notion of think about how you're treating this entity under the ethics code in deciding where you're going to apply the differential requirements.
Well, I'm happy to come in at this point, but I thought Luigi had his hand raised. Luigi, did you want to come in?
Sorry, again, technology. No, I had basically the same questions that Rich posed, and I understood the responses from Willie, so I'm satisfied with the responses.
Yeah, and I am equally comfortable with the response as well, because the intent is very clear. But I just wanted to maybe look at it in a way that's maybe looking at it in the reverse direction, which is the wording in the IESB's definition is if I can put it that way, Willie, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's conditional on the jurisdiction having refined the definition as you have it. If in whatever the wording is, if the jurisdiction has refined the definition, practitioners should be using the refined wording of the definition in applying the differential requirements in IESB standards, right? And what I want to just highlight is that I think we get to the same outcome as well if the jurisdiction, in fact, has not done any refinement, which, in theory, we should not rule out. It may be that the jurisdiction considers the IESB's definition as drafted and believes that this is all it needs. It works absolutely fine for that jurisdiction's purposes. In other words, there's no refinement, and therefore the definition as you have it captures all the entities that would be considered publicly traded entities in that jurisdiction. And for independence purposes, that would equally be the same outcome, because in that case, the code, in fact, doesn't require jurisdictions to refine the categories. The intent is for jurisdictions to take the broad categories and refine them, but it is entirely up to the jurisdictions. If we consider the definition of each category as drafted as being all that they need, and they don't need to do any refinement, that is the local definition of PTE. So you get to the same outcome as well from an independence perspective. So again, looking at it from both directions, if the jurisdiction has refined, we end up in the same place. But if the jurisdiction has not refined, you also end up in the same place on both audit and ethics.
Yeah, Ken, and you reminded me that some respondents did raise this, and this goes back to the what the respondents said in their comment letters. This goes back to the difference in our standards design, because theoretically, how it works, and I will come to what, because I do agree with Ken, but theoretically how it works is that we say, here's the core definition. If law regulation defines that more explicitly, then you apply the refinement for purposes of the ISKMs and ISAs. If you do not, then that full definition applies. And that is what we are saying. And again, what you're saying, that's the case. And that's what you clarified in the additional FAQ that was issued. Because in our mind, some respondents argue that you could still get a difference, because they said if a jurisdiction has no PTE and they're not doing anything about it, then under the ISKMs and ISAs, you will still have PTE because that's the core definition. And if you want to claim that you've complied with the ISAs, that's what you need to apply. Whereas you may, under the ethics code, not have that category. But as you say, remember part of the PDE definition is a listed entity under securities law regulation is a PTE. So that means you need to talk about someone that doesn't have a PTE definition. They have no notion of a listed entity, and then you could potentially have a difference. But otherwise, that listed entity would then be the PTE in that jurisdiction. And that's what the additional question in the FAQs clarified when that was issued in September. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Willy and Ken. Does anyone else want to make any question or any comment? If not, I think that really we can assume that the board is comfortable and agrees with the proposed way forward, which I would say there wouldn't be that many alternatives. As Mark said, we are where we are. Doesn't matter that much looking back, but we really need to look to the future and see what we can do, and it's our responsibility and obligation to do something together to make this work properly. So that's what we are trying to do, find smart solutions and effective solutions, which at the same time work in practice for the ones applying these standards, but at the same time protect the public interest as it must be protected. So I think it's the way forward, and I think that it's going to be something on our agendas for the next times. And at some point, we may need to do something else, and I think that we should keep creative and attentive to see if we can respond as quick and in as agile mode as we can to the issues or concerns that we will keep hearing from stakeholders, because it's not an easy topic. So thank you very much. I think this was a very important conversation, because this has been causing some unquietness over time, and I think that we are coming to a point where we can provide some confidence and stability to respondents with a very smart and at the same time professional response to these circumstances. So thank you, Willy, and thank you to IESB as well, and to the IESBA for the collaborative approach to this topic.
Thank you, Gabriela, and thank you very much for the opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you, Willy. You are welcome to stay if you want. We are going to speak. We will now speak about technology, which is something a little bit different. Okay, thank you very much. So yes, thank you. I hope that this was clear to everyone. It's a very difficult topic, very technical. It's not easy to get through and understand exactly what the issue is. But it's well, Mark, I think that what you said, this we are what we are, describes perfectly the situation. Things evolved in different moments, in different ways. And then it's our responsibility to settle this issue. So technology, moving forward with our agenda. We are 7 or 8 minutes late, but I think that we'll be able to finalize on time, I hope. But still, don't get me wrong, this is a very important topic. This is a growingly important topic. It's interesting that over the last 2 days and a half, the agenda had nothing to do with technology, apparently, and suddenly everything has to do with technology, and it comes in more and over and over and over. So I will just recall everyone that the IESBA issued standards 1 year and a half ago, December 2023, I think they were issued. Standards on technology. There was a lot of considerable number of thought leadership pieces that have been issued. So we need to use this properly, and this working group, I'm sure that it's very much focused on making this revive and also think about what else may we need to do. David, thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, you're right. Technology, unlike us, doesn't sleep. And we weren't on the agenda up until a month ago or so. So this is it's really an interim kind of update from the good work that Joanne and Jean are putting in some incredible work in the background there. So I will be very brief. We'll bring to you in September a much deeper dive brief, I think. But yeah, I'll just hand over very quickly to Jean for some exciting updates.
Thanks, David, and hello, everyone. Yes, like David indicated, this is a little bit different than our normal update. So we will not give you an update what we discussed during our technology experts group meeting or any of the environmental scanning. On the agenda, we have two topics that we will be covering is a report back on the stakeholder engagement that we have with the Stakeholder Advisory Council meeting, as well as the jurisdictional standard status meeting that took place in May. Carla and Sylvia did provide some feedback on that, but we'll focus more a little bit on technology. And then the second half of the presentation or the discussion today is we'll chat to you about the new IESBA chatbot that we're testing. We're very excited about it. But more about it a little bit later. We have asked Claudio, and I just want to pronounce his surname correctly, Girolami, that is the IFAC Chief Technology Officer. He will be joining us from 12 o'clock. If you do have any technical questions around the chatbot, he's there to help answer those questions, but seeing that we've been working very closely with him in that regard. But more on that a little bit later. So as indicated, the first feedback that we want to just give you is around the Stakeholder Advisory Council. And Carla gave a very good update and she referred to technology in her update. In the agenda item 2A, there's also a very good summary of the technology points that was covered. To not repeat anything that is being said, that was said as well. The reason why those points are included on the slide is there's a theme across the two discussions that took place between the SAC and the JSS, and it's the emerging role or the central role or the rise of artificial intelligence in the space as a whole. It's also in the sense that when the Stakeholder Advisory Council members, participants were asked about opportunities and challenges, obviously there's a lot of opportunities, but if we look at the challenges, it's a potential decline in professional skepticism, automation bias, as well as the over-reliance on AI outputs. So those are the messages that came very strongly across, and also that the members also mentioned was the close coordination between IESBA and the IAASB. As you're probably aware, is the IAASB has a project specifically on technology, and they are actively moving in that space. Joanne and myself are coordinating with the IAASB staff in that regard. We are attending the board meetings. We are attending their expert meetings as well to hear it firsthand. We are not just listening, we are participating to see as they move forward how that is influencing their standards and how our code relates to those as they move forward, so that we're on there at the same time. So we are coordinating. It's in the background, but we'll bring a little bit more update in that regard as well. I did speak to Angelo, who is the staff lead on the IAASB, to maybe that he bring us some update in September. To have key discussions during their board meeting next week. So I asked him if he might not give us an update during the September board meeting of the movement that they are doing in that regard, so that we're also know what's happening in that space. On the jurisdictional standard setters meeting, one of the questions was asked on the jurisdictions was the adoption and implementation of the standards. These standards were approved in December 2022 and certified in April 2023. They became effective end of last year, December 2024. So the question was how many of those participants indicated who has adopted or converged with the tech revisions. 11 participants indicated that they've already done so. 3 have not yet adopted, and 4 were currently in the process of doing that. There's obviously a huge number of reasons why they are still in the process of being adopted. I'm not going to go into that, but interesting, the participants did indicate that they were using webinars and training and guidance materials, as well as surveys to create awareness around technology, indicating what challenges there are to get the professional accountants on board as well. So board members, you had the opportunity to use Mentimeter, and we used Mentimeter during the jurisdictional standard setting meeting. And in a 30-minute period, that's how long we had. We had such rich feedback, as such a nice tool to get feedback from all the participants in a very short period of time. So you will see there's a lot on the slides that we're sharing, but this is based on the technology that we utilize to get that feedback. So one of the questions that we asked to those participants were, what were the challenges, the most significant ethical challenges and concerns that they have related to technology? And as you can see on the screen, it is the uses and the understanding of the risk associated with artificial intelligence, hallucinations, ownership, data privacy, the ease of access to OpenGenAI and applications, the knowledge in general, keeping up to date. It continues to the next slide. Over-reliance on technology, something that came up with the previous discussion as well. Lack of understanding the technology or the use of the output. The pace of change is ever changing. The cost involved, as well as, which I found very interesting, was the generational differences that also popped up as well. And even how to train the AI models was something that was very interesting. The second question we asked them was, currently we have a lot of resources available from IESBA, and we shared with them this slide as well as an appendix to, or appendix to their agenda paper, of a list of all the resources available, the link to the focus page, the pronouncement, the basis for conclusion, all the non-authoritative material, webinars, videos, the report, as well as a phase 2 report. We also indicated to them what were our initiatives that we planned. So you'll remember this slide from the March board meeting on the environmental scanning that we're doing with the technology experts group, the board education that we're bringing, the podcast. Maybe I can give a little bit of update on the podcast. So we are still actively pursuing the podcast. We're a little bit behind schedule. We wanted to get something to you by June. We'll get that soon out. Ruby and team is really working hard with us to get that out. So hopefully we'll share with that very soon. A recent development on exploring the IESBA code, we were able to secure a specialist in this area to update the artificial intelligence one. There's a lot of movement that happened on artificial intelligence, specifically also on the agentic AI. So what that influences is on the accounting profession and the ethical implications. So that specialist will give us an updated exploring the IESBA code by the end of the summer, so end of August. So hopefully by the September board meeting, we'll be able to provide that to you as well. The other area that we're also looking for exploring the IESBA code in the same period is blockchain. So that is coming soon to you as well. And then also the others is the stakeholder engagement and the continued coordination, which I just referred to as well. So we just mentioned this to the JSS members as well. So we asked them, what else can we at the IESBA do to create awareness around the technology, provisions, what the challenges are, and to help professional accountants deal with ethical challenges, threats, and dilemmas. So on this slide is a summary of what we heard. On the left-hand side is practical implications like webinars, podcasts, FAQs, real case examples, use cases, case studies that came up. On the right-hand side was more conversational types of engagements like best practice forums, insights, those joint material between the IEESB and IESBA, sessions dedicated to trainees as well as the smaller practices. Maybe one thing that I just want to mention on the joint material from the IEESB is we are looking to have a podcast when the podcast is launched with the IEESB as they move on their project forward. So they're very early in this stage, so they won't be able to do it just right now, but maybe towards the end of the year, that is where we'll have a joint session in that regard as well. And then also an AI tool for the code, self-assessment tool for the professional accountants in business and practice, and also just to remember that it's not just all about AI, but cybersecurity is still very relevant. So very, very insightful information that was shared by the JSS and the SAC as well. What are we going to do with this? The participants provided us with their names when they gave us their feedback. So if we have any clarifying questions, we're able to go back. They were made aware of that. So we will be engaging with them to get a better understanding of some of these aspects of what they had in mind when they wrote it down to get the right approach or the right touch to what we need to do. And we will incorporate that as we move forward and have this discussion at the TWG, the Technology Working Group meeting. Maybe one thing, and I kind of forgot about that when I spoke to the agentic AI, is on Monday, RSM issued a news release that they are investing $1 billion in the technology specifically. They are merging and they're forming, making huge investments in technology specifically. And just want to read quickly for you to say that this is very relevant, very topical at the moment, is that they announced that a series of strategic investments over the next 3 years to help the middle market build the necessary frameworks, operating models, and technological infrastructures. And these include developing, investing in industry-specific AI tools and talent, fully integrating agentic AI into the RSM assurance, tax, and consulting services to optimize performance and unlock efficiencies, empowering the talent, which is a very thing that we've heard, is having the staff understand how to use these tools. So empowering the talent with agentic AI tools to heighten productivity and professional growth, and also to expand these types of solutions throughout the client lifecycle to elevate the overall client experience. So very, very relevant. So super excited that we're able to get something out soon, seeing that this is coming on the forefront as well. I am going to, so the second half I indicated, we are going to chat to you about the IESBA chatbot. We are super excited about this. I must put a caveat on it. It is very, very early stages. This is nothing that we're not going to show you a demo, so don't feel to ask us questions, to type into the chatbot. We're not comfortable quite yet to do that. Joanne will show you a little bit what we've been doing so far, what we're planning ahead, and some of the flaws and the aspects. So we'll dive into that. We want to hear from you afterwards and when we do open for questions. So please share your thoughts in that regard. But with that, I'll hand over to Joanne.
Thanks, Jean. And like Jean was saying, we're still in the testing phases of the IESBA chatbot. It is not available to the public. So we want to spend the next couple of minutes walking through what we have done, showing some examples of some of the types of questions that the IESBA chatbot can answer. But to kind of set the scene a little bit, I think we've had a lot of discussion over the past couple of days about simplification of the code. And hopefully this IESBA chatbot can be a tool that users and stakeholders can use to answer questions about the code, as well as get some answers about some things outside of the code, for example, NAM, supporting materials, and other information on the website. But again, it is still in the testing and development stages. So just want to walk you through very quickly about the development and what we have done so far. There we go. So like Jean was saying earlier, we've worked with Claudio from the IFAC tech team to create the chatbot on the Microsoft Copilot platform. And the Copilot currently pulls information from the IESBA 2024 handbook, as well as the IESBA website. So any questions that we ask the chatbot will be pulling from those resources. Our team has been testing the chatbot using, and this is just internal language we've been using for the testing, but code-related questions versus more general questions like when is the next IESBA meeting? What is JSS? What is SAC? So those kind of questions that you might not find in the code. And we've been collaborating with others within IFAC as well who are exploring developing a similar AI chatbot, so sharing lessons learned and such. So here is an example of what we call one of the general questions. So if you can see on the screen, it says, when is the next IESBA meeting? And the chatbot provides the answer. And this was asked before this meeting, saying that the IESBA meeting is scheduled for June 9th through 12th in New York. And it provides the references as well. So you can see here, it provides a link to the IESBA meeting website and shows you the information and the link where it pulled in the information. This is an example of a more technical question, so what we call a code-related question. So this is a question about ETGAs. Just reading it out loud for the group very quickly, are individual members of the audit team when they perform internal quality management reviews or regulatory inspections subsequent to the completion of an audit engagement. I won't read out the whole answer, but it says basically, no, they're not considered members of the audit team, and then provides references for where it pulled the information. So the IESBA code, it pulls from the final pronouncement as well as the press release talking about the final pronouncement as well. And we'll cover this in another slide, but we're thinking about potential enhancements to the chatbot, and one of them is adding a NAM here about the staff Q&A. This is something that could be added to this question to help, again, enhance the information that's provided to the user. So again, this is still in the testing stage, and we are considering some enhancements to help the chatbot answer the questions more accurately and more thoroughly. One of them is providing more NAM resources for the chatbot to pull information from and provide as resources for the user. Another one is currently right now, like I mentioned earlier, the chatbot is pulling from the 2024 handbook. So we are looking to include previous versions of the IESBA handbook, starting probably with the earlier ones, 2023, 2022, and then potentially going back to 2018 with the restructured code is our current thought process. We're also considering updating interactivity of the chatbot with the user. So potentially having trigger phases here, such as what version of the code are you using? Are you doing early adoption for certain provisions? Are you a PAIB? So having some sort of interactions so that we can get more targeted answers and helping the chatbot kind of provide more specific answers that the user might be looking for. So I covered this in the previous slide a little bit about adding trigger phases. So again, those are prompting questions that the user can answer to help the chatbot provide more specific responses for the user. The second bullet, adding or editing topics. Again, the user potentially can select topics like, I have a question on ETGAs, I have a question on PIs, I have a question on long association. So helping users kind of navigate the chatbot a little bit more. Continuing to expand on the knowledge sources. Again, that's adding previous versions of the code, adding more NAM so that the chatbot can pull from more resources when answering these questions. Adjusting generative answers, that's a little bit more on the technical side, but we're debating and thinking through as a team, do we want the chatbot, for example, to answer word for word what's in the code? Do we want them to provide an interpretation of some of the NAM or some things in the code? How do we want the AI to be answering these types of questions? And then as well, continuing testing on the chatbot. This is a very iterative process. So we've started testing as a team. We're seeing how the chatbot is responding. We're working with Claudio, providing the results of the testing, and we're making updates to the chatbot accordingly based on the answers that they're giving. And now I'll hand it back to Jean to see if she has any comments before we open it up for questions.
Thanks, Joanne. One thing, so we shared with you all the right answers. So there was also many wrong answers that we got. So we didn't share that with you. Maybe thinking out loud, one of the questions I asked, what is all the requirement paragraphs? And it gave me 5, which is not great. But again, it's about how do we ask the question? How is the user going to ask the question? So those are some of the things that we're thinking as a team, as well as, so would if I phrase it, give me all the R paragraphs, would it provide a more complete list? So that is kind of what would be in the back end if we do what the kind of anticipating how the user would ask these questions. One reason why I asked Joanne to hand back to me as well is literally this morning I read an article on LinkedIn, and I do want to share with it because it's such a good framing of that this is a tool, and whether you're using the right tool for the right type of output that you want. So it is on evolving AI, and it's not finance related, so do bear with me. So a Citrix engineer ran a test using an Atari 2600 emulator, which is running on a 1.1 megahertz power, which was developed in 1979. And it was asked to play chess against ChatGPT. Obviously, ChatGPT lost by far. Even though this robot only thought 1 or 2 steps ahead, the ChatGPT still struggled by confusing the different types of pieces, losing track what was where they were in the positions, the kind of the moves that it took earlier. So, and eventually it gave up, which I found very interesting. So in the article, it says not to embarrass ChatGPT, but it actually shows you limitations. It shows you limitations with words and actions, maybe about the logical thinking around that, memory of heavy tasks, and it needs structure and consistency. So it does state that there is definitely tools out there that is by far playing chess far better than a human being out there. That was not the purpose of the exercise. But reflecting on this and actually reading the comments that was shared by those that engaged with the post was that you do need to use the right technology for the right type of output that you want to use. Obviously, ChatGPT is not great at playing chess, so don't use ChatGPT to play your chess, although you might think of it more strategically and holistically around that, but not actually playing the actual game. So I just wanted to share that with you. I found it very, very interesting, and the element of knowing exactly what you need to use for is actually in our code. So I linked it back to some of the requirements or suggestions or application material in our code. Gabriela, if I can hand back to you, thanks.
Thank you so much, John and Joanne. This is our J crew. We have so many J that sometimes I make mistakes. So Jean and Joanne, thank you so much for the presentation. I think that it was really an energizing and exciting presentation. So congratulations for all these ideas and work that you have been putting together in this area of technology. It's really welcome. I think that we have so much to do that we have to have some caution with respect to resources and capacity and etc. But it's amazing, and I'd say I'm not kidding that this is a very good example again of putting in practice the strategy that we are adopting of closer connection to stakeholders, engagement. I'd say that the smart parts are simplification in terms of access, mobilization, even an incentive to adoption, responsiveness, and etc. So this is really good, and we cannot but try to do something in this area, which helps us as a board along the lines that I heard here over the last days. I heard so many suggestions about this and that and that and that can be helped and driven through technological instruments and approaches. So sorry for this very immediate reaction, but it's really re-energizing, and congratulations for the creativity and imagination, which is very welcome, mostly at this stage. So I will open the floor now for comments and questions, and I'm sure that there will be many, starting with David.
Thank you. I just wanted to provide a little bit of context to the wonderful presentation that Jeanne shared before the board members ask some questions, just to perhaps alleviate some anxiety. As Jeanne said, there's a reason we didn't show it live. It's because there are very real issues that need to be worked through. We've also talked about it in the context of it being a really smart search tool. So a lot of what you've heard today is about the search features and the search capability. We are not talking about this tool from the perspective of asking an ethical question and giving ethical advice, judgments, or anything like that, because that's a whole level of AI that I don't think the AI, frankly, is capable of doing yet, any of them. So I just wanted to provide that context to help alleviate some concerns, because to your point, Gabriela, when you mentioned about caution, the reputational risk could be quite dramatic. So that's one aspect. The other aspect that you probably already gleaned from Jeanne's example when it gave the answer back of 5 of the requirements, which made me smile, because I was thinking, Chana, that you said we could just stop at the conceptual framework. So there was a little tongue-in-cheek around that. But all joking aside, the point that Jeanne is making around how questions are asked is massively important, because you think about who's testing it right now. You think about the educational background, the level of skill, and then you think about the users, their experience, their words, the way their phraseology. So there's a lot of work to do around that. And I just wanted to provide a little bit of color and context around that diversity that we're going to need to build in, because that's attached to some of the historical issues around AI disasters for some organizations. So I just wanted to alleviate with a little bit of context, because I can imagine that some people are already wondering some of these things. And I think the working group that David is chairing, we're certainly proceeding with a great deal of enthusiasm, but an even greater level of caution to make sure that we do the right thing at the right time and in the right way. So I just want to provide that context to help.
Thank you very much, David. Sadia, please.
I'm so excited about this. And I'm so glad that we're doing it with showing us what's out there before trying to get the perfect answer or the perfect product. And I think that's what we should learn from this experience, is that we shouldn't aim for perfection over here. We should actually think about a simple chatbot and then see how we can grow that with time. Some AI tools have conversations with you. Can you tell me more? Can you be more specific? And I would really love that for a technical AI tool like this, because the first question would be is, which version of the code are you thinking about using? I think it's already been mentioned, but I think the testing doesn't need to be done with the people around the table, because this should be open to everyone. And when it is open to everyone, they're not going to ask the question like the way we would probably, because of us understanding definitions and terminology. I think it's important to have that testing done with a very rudimentary level and different levels of people looking for answers and how we can guide, because that will give you the right answer. There was a question on what level of detail, and I think we've been mentioning this word simplification. It needs to be a simple answer, but details to follow. And then, of course, the disclaimer that this is the best of the ability of the question you asked. Yeah, excited.
Thank you, Sadia. Rania, please.
Thank you. So this is really very exciting and very impressive. Just a few thoughts that came to my mind while you were discussing the chatbot, and then I'll go back to your presentation, John. So, and very much in line with what others have been saying and what you've said as well, I mean, concerning the accuracy and how the response and, the familiarity of the person asking the questions with the phraseology and so on and so forth. So have you considered like monitoring the responses from our side and keeping a log of those responses? So I think it's important, and perhaps then a first question should be like to ask that, the person asking the question or entity for like their email address or a way to reach out to them, so that just in case after subsequent monitoring, it turns out that the answer provided, because that's always going to be a risk, even if you improve on it, if you realize that the answer that was provided was not exactly what we would like, an ideal answer or a suboptimal answer, then you can, go back to that individual. I think that's important. Another thing is to guard against the reputational risk, perhaps keep a log of the responses, because then somebody might claim, I asked this question and that's the response I got. So I think it's very important to make sure you know who you are answering what, and keep a log, because I think, there is a certain level of responsibility with what we're dealing with. And another thing is also always to keep the possibility that, there are certain questions that the chatbot is unable to answer, and or perhaps even it shouldn't answer. So, for example, when it comes to certain like ethical dilemmas, or you may, as a board, you may not want to go there. And how would you deal with that? And so again, this is, I think, extremely important to keep in mind. And finally, concerning the resources that you were talking about to consider that were suggested, it's all very interesting. But I would recommend that you approach it slightly differently, in the sense that let's think about the content that we'd like to, develop. And then we consider what kind of, like, whether should it be a webinar or something, or something else, or a podcast or whatever. If you ask me, as a member of this profession, what I'd be looking for when it comes to technology is like, what are opportunities that I could use technology, and what are the risks? Like, for example, this is, and I would like, also going back to the discussion we were having yesterday about the NAM, like, not to have, like, for example, very long webinars or podcasts. Like, so many times I've registered for webinars or something, and then something comes up and I can't make it. Like, if it's like sound bites, as the term was used yesterday, like this technology is available, you can use it this way to facilitate your work in reporting, in assurance, in education, and whatever. But that's a risk that, you'd have to pay attention to. It could, and just like information nuggets, golden nuggets, I think, especially with the rapid pace of technology, I think that's what we need, what I would need. If you ask me personally, on the personal level, that's what I would need. How can I use it? What should I be, what should I be aware of in terms of risks? I hope this is helpful, but it's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, it's amazing. Nancy, please. Nancy, please.
Thank you. I'm also very excited, but perhaps with a little bit of a cautionary statement. I'm in my third year of a Gen AI journey and building such tools. So have worked on multiple Gen AI agents, including using Copilot. And and Jana, your LinkedIn, I just had to laugh because it was so spot on. These kinds of tools, I think today, are very good enablement tools. They are not reliance tools. And so in thinking about that, when you're thinking about testing, and I'm not going to go at length here, but some things to consider. One, content curation is everything. If you have bad content, it's garbage in, garbage out. And content curation under Gen AI is different than content curation for a human to use. Because Gen AI consumes content differently. And so you have to start thinking about how Gen AI is going to consume content in order to spit it out. And happy to have further discussions on some of the lessons learned we've had in that, but so important. Also, governance. What we've found in lessons learned is the governance comes kind of after the tool is released, and you really need to be thinking about governance now. So UAT is part of governance, content curation, what content looks like is part of governance, but there's other decisions that need to be considered, including ongoing testing, a variety of things. So think about what governance looks like and make sure you're thinking through an appropriate governance model. Going back to these tools today, I don't believe you'll get to a confidence level where it's reliance-based. Most of these, you want to keep the human in the loop, right? So there's some form of validation that can be done through disclaimers. We're finding that disclaimers sort of at the beginning of the session and after a question is responded, while it can be a bit annoying, is probably pretty important to continue to remind people that this is a Gen AI response. It's subject to error. you need to validate the response before relying on this. And there's a difference between what I would call an operational question and a technical question. So asking when the next IESBA meeting is, not that worried about that, right? If it's wrong, they'll figure it out. But if they rely on a particular question to what does the code require without validation, that might present more risks. So just kind of thinking about that. And then the last thing I will say, and it's been touched on, but the quality of the prompt results in a quality answer. And what we've actually found is that subject matter prompts are terrible. People who are not subject matter experts actually ask better questions for Gen AI. So I think what you want to do is make sure you're using non-subject matter experts to pose questions to see what the quality of the responses looks like, because that's your audience. And what we've also found is that providing like a guide on how to prompt and how to prompt iteratively. So you ask a question, it doesn't quite respond, and then you provide more information. That kind of tool, I think, is worth developing. I don't think you need it upon immediate release, but I think you'll find user engagement is much better. And it is a bit of caution there. You know, your user engagement, if they come in and the tool really is not helpful to them, you might get them once, you might get them twice, and it's going to fall off pretty rapidly. And we've seen a lot of very unfortunate behaviors in that environment where we've lost people, and trying to get them back in is difficult. So happy to take more lessons learned offline. Very, very supportive of this. I mean, this is the future. And I think this is the way to getting users to be able to more easily engage with the code. But there's a framework behind that. And it sounds like you're already doing the hard work on that. So thank you.
Thank you so very much, Nancy. Your experience here, I think, will be absolutely critical, and it's very interesting to hear from you the lessons learned and the cautions that we need to put in this initiative. So thank you for sharing, and thank you for for continuing providing this advice. And sharing that experience, which I think will be absolutely critical. Moreover, your recommendation or your advice about who should be the ones testing the language, I think that is something that, if anything, we should do with anything. Because if a non-accountant or someone with a different background of us, these people in this circle understands, it means that accountants will understand. If they don't understand, accountants may or not, and the users in general. So I think that this is something that we should start doing in a very simple way. Test it with your children, or with someone from your family who is an engineer, or a doctor, or a lawyer or a professor, and see if they understand what you're saying. If not, there is a problem. So thank you very much for your intervention. Christelle, please.
Thank you. I had one question and one comment. My comment, in fact, is very much linked with what was said by Rania and Nancy. Nancy, in a very professional way. I was just going to give the comment that I had the experience with chatbot in shopping, and I regularly get very frustrated. And the good experiences that I have is when the chatbot is trying to help me better formulate my need, eventually proposing some orientation, etc., to help me formulate it the way that it could understand my question or my dilemma. So just, and this means that the way chatbot is introducing the question to understand your perspective, from where are you speaking to it, the way it gives you opportunity to deepen or to reorient your question, and the politeness of the expression of the chatbot. That's my comment. And on my question was, you showed the answer to some questions, and then after a literal answer, there are references to some document. To what extent your references are big chunk of the codes, small articles? What do we get when we end up with the references? Because if it's you have a question on sustainability, you get a reference on part 5. You see what I mean? So I don't know if it's you that generated the granularity of the references or it's the chatbot that does it. But
Thank you, Christelle. I liked your comment. Well, I liked everything, but your comment about politeness of the checkbox, because it's something to which I'm very sensitive as well. When they just respond, I don't understood your question. Do it again. And pragmatism and effectiveness should never prevent or preempt politeness. So, Rich, please.
Yeah, I certainly support this. I also have experience like Nancy that this can be, as she outlined it in detail, and I won't get into it more complicated. I have 2 questions. One is a high level. My understanding is today, if someone were to call a staff member at the board, we don't respond with an answer that one can rely on, that we somehow caveat that. And so I'm curious as to whether we're going to have the caveats in here that said you need to do your own research in that. That was my first question. And the second one is on this example with this chatbot, those links to the documents that are at the bottom, which I think it's excellent you have those, do they actually take you to the space where it is? Because I can't find those words in any of those 3 documents that you've referenced. I can't find the answer to that. I've been sitting here searching. And so I'd be curious, have we validated these answers that have come up in the chatbots? Or maybe there's a document reference that I can't see on the slide here or something.
So, Rich, sorry, if I can pop in quickly on the second question. So the question on the ETGA is exactly word for word what is in the NAM from the FAQs. So ironically, one of the links is not the FAQ. And that is because there's no, in the resource at the moment, there's no direct link to that. And that's where the further enhancements goes to that point. It shows you the code in general, so you're going to have to read the whole code. But we are looking at how we can do that. Unfortunately, at this stage, it is PDF documents, so it's not bookmarked and all of these things. So that might need further thought.
That's fine. I hadn't found the FAQs, and that's why I asked, is there another document linked here? And it is. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rich. And finally, Chana, please.
So thank you for the technology working group's presentation. Exciting times. But I think based on what David said, it's pretty early days. Still a lot of testing going on. I think we should embark on the journey, but we should go cautiously. And I like Nancy's suggestion of disclaimers up and down so that they know that, you might not be getting the right answer. And maybe initially we should focus more on the search, searching for information part. And just something Joanne said that when it's pulling references, it goes to the latest handbook, and then you were thinking of doing prior years. I mean, I wouldn't do the prior years unless the search person in the search text they are saying, tell me what it was in 2022, because otherwise they might get an incorrect year and they're looking at a incorrect version of it. Then coming back to Richard's question about, you have to be very careful not to give professional advice. We sort of even in Australia, when people call us and ask us something about the standard, we sort of say we can tell you where to go in a standard, but we are not telling you how you have to read that paragraph or how you interpret it, because that would be something which would be very, based on your circumstances. We don't carry professional indemnity insurance, so we are not your advisor. You need to go and engage with an accountant and get that advice. So I wouldn't go to the interpretive part yet, because that could be very risky. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chana. I don't see anyone else. So back to the team.
Thanks, Gabriela, and thank you for everybody's comments. I just quickly want to make a few comments and some of the questions that was asked. Definitely, I think we want to have the bot recognized and when it's unable to respond. So when it needs to reach out to the staff and to prompt them to actually engage further. It does speak to the log that you referred to, Rania. That is something that at the moment we are even logging it for the team to see what is being asked, what is being responded. We tested when we asked it the same question twice and it gave two different answers. So these are the things that we are testing and operationally looking at the moment. We have thought about disclaimers and those things. So definitely going to take all these points on and formulate it very nicely. So when we do bring it back to you, to the board at some time, that you can see what we've moved in that regard. Especially also on giving the advice. I don't think the intention is to give advice. It is to indicate where you have to refer to the code and to apply the principles that's dealing with it. Maybe one thing on the specific years of the code that we are thinking, because the code do have consequential amendments and there was renumbering in the paragraph numbers. So it would be very prudent to indicate which code they have adopted in their jurisdiction. If those, for example, the 23 code, but they're early adopting the tax planning, for example, so they're able to refer that the chatbot knows how to navigate. I like the point that Nancy raises to think how the AI bot thinks. I don't know how the AI bot thinks. I need to think about that a little bit more, but logically kind of thinking of how you would now navigate as a human to get to a response. But we'll re-engineer that thought. On the what do you get to the references, and it's to your point, Rich, as well. I think that's something, Chriselle, that you also asked it. It is at the moment, like Joanne indicated, the two resources is the IESBA website and the 2024 handbook. It doesn't refer to specific links to the non-authoritative material. That's why the NAM did not come up when we referred to the ETJ. It doesn't go to the specific paragraph because it's not bookmarked. It would give you the whole part 5 if you have an ISA question in that regard. So it is something that we need to think about of how it's being dealt with, how it's being absorbed, and in that regard. And yeah, we haven't thought about it yet, but we'll think about it in future. I don't know if David or Joanne wants to say.
Yeah, I had a few reflections, Jean. Thank you very much. That was a really exciting presentation. And thank you overwhelmingly for the support. With caution, of course. A lot of what I'm hearing actually really points to the direction of control and governance to your point, Nancy. When I hear about the references, where I hear about the funneling, the questioning, the structuring, and what we will allow the AI behind it to do in the first place is all about control. And I think if we get that part right, this will be an exciting and very useful tool going forward. And I commend the board for looking at this very optimistically. I think we have to take a very optimistic view on this type of stuff because it is the way forward. It is the future. Maybe we want to think about calling it something else other than chatbot, because I do understand that it comes with a lot of negative connotations when we think about chatbot. We've all had bad experiences with chatbots, right? But we promise this will be this won't go to market until it's good. But I do also appreciate Sadia's point, which is don't let perfect get in the way of good either, because that essentially gets in the way of progress at the same time. But yeah, thank you very much. We'll take it all on board, and we'll probably do a meeting very shortly. So we'll reflect on this. Thank you very much.
I have just one follow-up question. Is this been tested in a private license area? Okay.
That's a yes.
Okay, sorry, I still see the Obichukwu. Obichukwu, please.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm also very pleased with the chatbot. It's very is in time with the times that we are in. I just want to ask, given how people will interact and engage, do we have enough resources, as in the people to always be available to make sure that the answers are given on time? Because sometimes when you type in a question and there's a delay in getting a response, you might as well just leave it up and just look for somewhere else you can get your answer. So we need, if we're committing to this, we need to make sure we have dedicated staff that will always be there, because you can even get a question to in different time zone. And so we have to also consider this resource allocation, both people and technology, because of the different time zones. People can be bringing in questions, and if it's not coming on time, people can turn people off. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Obichukwu. Jean, please.
Sorry, Gabriela, I'm not sure if Claudia wants to add anything, what we've heard from the board, of any clarifying.
Oh,
So,
thank you for
Claudio,
having me. Hello,
sorry?
everyone. This is Claudio. Hello, everyone.
Hello, Claudio.
Well,
Do you
thank
want
you
to
for
add
having me.
anything to what's, okay.
Yeah, no, I wanted to just, a lot of very good points have been made today. And this is really going to be just at the very, very early stages. So I want to just stress that point. As any software lifecycle program, is done, normally the testing before it gets to user acceptance is done by, to test the branching, the logic, the knowledge and all that stuff before it actually even gets to the user acceptance, which is critical at that point. So that, will definitely, it's definitely in the path of the software lifecycle development. So I just want to address a couple of other points that were made today regarding the questions and the logs and the responses and so forth. That's automatically embedded. The log is automatically embedded in the software itself. So every question and answer are recorded. In addition, the team has been also recording, tracking it differently in spreadsheets and so forth. So that's definitely been addressed. And I can't stress how important it is, the curation, I heard that, of the content and how the content is structured and fed, the knowledge is fed to the tool itself. And we're making a lot of progress on that structure as well. So I agree with the disclaimers, and the risk, assessing the risk is critical. These are all valid points, and it will depend on the strategy and the usage of the tool itself, how we want to eventually make it provided to the public, and the way that we and how we want to use it and structure it, basically. So that will be critical to assess the actual risk as well. So if you have other specific questions, I'm obviously always within reach at IFAC. And I thank the team to really considering this tool that I think is very, very timely with everything, modern, providing a modern way to do research. Probably the research assistant will probably be a better name than the chatbot, but on the IESBA code in general and all the other knowledge that we want to include in this tool. So that's just what I wanted to add.
Thank you very much, Claudio, for joining us and for having been assisting the team and the IESBA with your knowledge and experience. So thank you. Ken, please.
Yes, thank you very much. And this has been a very interesting presentation from Jean, Joanne, and David. I think it's exciting times ahead of us, and we're going to see how this process of development unfolds. And we will have another future update to the board on the progress on the chatbot, and maybe we'll even have a competition amongst the board as to how we're going to christen the chatbot. You know, who's going to come up with the most exciting and appealing name. I think that'll be good. But just wanted to come back to Obichuku. You know, if I heard your comment or suggestion as to have human resources behind the chatbot in case the user or a stakeholder doesn't get the answer that they are looking for by interrogating the chatbot. Because if that is what you are thinking, I don't believe that we will have the capacity to do that. We would not be able to put any team members behind, in effect, on standby to provide an answer to whoever has a question that they are inputting into the chatbot and not getting the right answer, so to speak. There wouldn't be a detour to someone on the team to provide the answer to what they are looking for. The chatbot, if we get to a stage where it's ready for prime time, would be a tool that we would make available to stakeholders, obviously, with all the caveats. That's a given. But I don't believe that we will be able to put any, sort of, like you say, any sort of staff capacity behind it to provide human responses to questions that might be raised. So just want to make that clear, that the chatbot is going to be a technological tool that potentially could be made available to stakeholders once it's ready. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. We spoke about this in our last TWG meeting as well, that there is a risk here that the chatbot does open a doorway to a help desk, if you like, staffed by folks. But it's good to have those parameters and that feedback. That we would not have the resource to do that. So I agree with you. But it was very good input, Ubishuko. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you, to the working group, to the staff members working on these very creative and exciting topics. I think that for now you are over. Thank you very much. And to Claudio again. So with this very exciting presentation and conversation, with all the belt and brace that we need to put, but with all the enthusiasm, let's go through this part that we can't avoid. And for now, and for today, we will close the work session. We'll have some session this afternoon or this evening, but of a different nature. And I'll ask Ken, please, to give you the details.
Yes, just recap of the arrangements for this afternoon. So the board meeting is closed for today. There is a social event that's been organized. So you should have all received details about this. I just want to confirm the meeting point for those who would like to travel together. The meeting point is the Knickerbocker Hotel. For those who would like to travel together, if I could ask you to meet around 10 minutes or so before 4 o'clock, 10, 15 minutes, if you can meet, let's say in the lobby of the hotel. And then as you will guide us to take the train to downtown. Secondly, if you're all advised to wear comfortable walking shoes, because it is a bit of a walking tool and a hike. And guess what? The sun has invited itself, so we have wonderful weather, but it is going to be very warm. So wear comfortable shoes and also something that you'll be comfortable with in the sort of environment there when it's going to be quite warm. Thirdly, for those who would like to bike on the island, there are bikes available, city bikes. And as you has indicated in her email that there is an app that you can download. It's called the City Bike app. So if you would like to take advantage of this opportunity to explore the island on bicycle, by all means do that. And finally, if you have not submitted your contributions to ask you for the event, please do so at your earliest convenience. Thank you. And I see Chigo.
Thank you very much. And Sego, your turn, please, about this today, 3 topics on adoption and implementation, technology, and PI update from IESB, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was worried that you'll close before I have a little bit of what I wanted to say. So I thought I'll just mention 3 things per the agendas that we have received today. Under the adoption and implementation, I think the PIOB, we welcome the IMAC as part of the formal monitoring mechanism. And this actually addresses, I think, one of the PI issues we had picked up before we published the June public interest issues. What remains is possibly to think about the second part of what we had raised, which is that rapid response to any challenges that the implementation may bring under that agenda item. And then if we move on to the PI issue, under the PI issue, I think what I just needed to I think flag there is to welcome the joint action group between the two, because that strengthened the coordination that we've been talking about even from yesterday. I think what I observed is also the wish to get the two boards involved, including the observer stage, as well as the in-depth working at the technical committee level. Then the last agenda item, which we're just closing now, that talks to the technology. Yes, we are looking at what we can do from a technological space, but I think there's also an opportunity again for IESBA to probably liaise with IESB around this technology space to address the one other public interest issue that we've picked up around the audit and ethics and the independence around the AI issues, just for consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Tego, for these comments and contribution. We will, of course, take them on board for consideration, but it's good that to know that the PIOB is comfortable, at least with part of what you've heard today. Thank you very much. And now the session is officially closed for today. So we will meet later this afternoon. I hope that everybody is going to be able and happy to join the activity, which is really part of our dynamics as a board. Thank you. See you later.